there'd been a fire in the Elizabeth Road area of Boston.
Police discovered a woman, early 30s, in a flat on her own, dead.
It was clearly a very violent, cold-blooded killing.
It was scary, not something you expect to happen on your doorstep.
The people of Boston feared that there was a killer at large.
We thought, is this to do with this gang-related thing? They'd just got her. They'd found out where she lived and got her.
In the heart of the Lincolnshire countryside is the thriving market town of Boston.
Boston's a town that's steeped in history. At one stage, it was the second largest port in the UK to Liverpool. You've got such things as the Guildhall.
We've got a nice Boston stamp. It's a big church, which is very beautiful architecture. You can see from anywhere. If you get lost, just to look for a Boston stamp.
Because it's rural, you've got plenty of nice open spaces. And then you've got a town with local people in it, local trades.
It was a small village and now it's a town. And they're very lovely people, very laid back. They have a very Bostonian humour about them.
Anybody that comes past, it's always good morning. It's not like city life where they just ignore each other.
No, we'll be sat on the doorstep having a cup of tea. An old woman or someone comes past, you're like, all right, good morning.
Yeah, you don't know him from Adam, but you just say good morning.
Yeah.
With its surrounding farmland, Boston has long been a draw for those looking for work.
Boston is essentially the vegetable breadbasket of the United Kingdom. About a third of the fresh fruit and vegetable comes from that area in the whole of the UK.
Farmers need, packhouses need X amount of casual labour. Boston doesn't hold that amount of casual labour, so that labour has to come in from elsewhere. And that's always been the case all the way back.
In recent years, the town has been transformed by the arrival of workers from across Europe.
Boston's changed incredibly over the last 20 years with the migration from the European Union. It's had the highest amount of migration for anywhere in the country. The first wave came from Portugal, but gradually as more Eastern European countries came into the EU, it was predominantly Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and then Poland, and latterly Bulgaria and Romania.
Many European people here. There's lots of factory and field work, jobs around, many cabbages. That's where you got sprouts for Christmas. So we are not that bad.
33-year-old Marina Urte moved to Boston in 2007 to start a new life for herself.
Marina came from Latvia. She found work at a fruit packaging plant, and I think she was fairly popular there and well-liked.
She was more crazier than me. No, she was a lovely girl. She was beautiful, quite popular. When she started her work, she'd been offered higher position than other people. She was like a leader.
She was known as being quite frank and quite honest, but also a hard worker.
She wanted jobs done right. She would tell you where to go, what to do and how to do. And if obviously somebody was doing something wrong, she wouldn't be quiet. Quite perfectionist.
We were working together in the same factories and we would go out partying sometimes, but I would say most of our time we would spend at the job. Me and Marina, we were similar in terms of career progression and temperament and wanting to improve, earn more money and create more comfortable life for us.
Marina had settled into Boston, and with a steady job and a new group of friends, she met 33-year-old Gytis Griskavakis.
She met Gytis in 2009. He came from Lithuania.
He used to work with us at the factory as well. He was a very nice, intelligent guy, very friendly, very caring. And I just remember that he turned up at our door, taking her out somewhere. They were really happy, they were really in love.
And they married quite quickly, I think, in 2010.
They have a nice wedding, and she have a nice dress, and it was like a fairy tale, like a big love story. They loved each other, and that was really in love and happy.
He was flying and he had all the sparks in his eyes, and Marina, so yeah, they were in love.
And it wasn't long before Marina and Gytis decided to start a family together. In November 2010, Marina gave birth to their baby daughter.
She was very good mommy. She adored the little girl. She was always calling her little princess, always.
Gytis, likewise, was also a good husband and a good dad. They were a normal, happy family.
Sadly, the relationship between Marina and Gytis didn't last. But they both agreed to raise their daughter together whilst living separately. And as Marina continued to impress at her job, she began to think big for her future.
She was always taking care of flowers, and she always dreamed to have some little shop with many different kinds, and she would sell them for special occasions like weddings or big birthdays.
But in the summer of 2016, everything changes when one of Marina's neighbours calls an emergency engineer, believing there's been a gas leak.
The next door neighbour smelt something under her stairs.
But when the engineer arrives, he suspects the smell is coming from Marina's flat and looks through her letterbox. They spot a smouldering fire and call the fire brigade immediately.
Fire rescue.
Oh, hello. I've been called to the downstairs flat, but we can smell smoke from upstairs, and there's fire damage to the stairs.
Right, okay.
I remember learning there'd been a fire in the Elizabeth Road area of Boston. I don't think there was any obvious sign of a fire from outside, but certainly the neighbours were aware that it had been a fire.
The lady from downstairs thinks there'll be somebody inside upstairs, but we can't get up the stairs because they're too damaged.
Okay, we have got fire crews on the way to it, okay.
Firefighters force their way into the flat and put out the smouldering fire, whilst checking if anyone is home. At first it appears empty, but as the crew enter the bathroom, they make a shocking discovery.
They find a woman, early 30s, in a flat on her own, dead, obviously by strange circumstances, in a bath, no water in the bath, covered in soot, with a hose on top of her. You know, you think, good gracious, you know, how on earth has this happened?
Police are immediately called to the scene.
I want to know what the cause of death is roughly at that stage. So is it a homicide? Is it suspicious? I mean, just because a body's been found in the bath doesn't necessarily mean it's suspicious. It could have been an accidental fire or something like that.
Police quickly established that the dead woman is Marina Ertey. It becomes obvious she has been brutally attacked, with horrific injuries to her face and body. A murder investigation is immediately launched and officers secure the scene.
It's all about scene preservation. The scene can tell you a phenomenal amount, and the last thing that you need is that scene corrupting.
News of Marina's death quickly spreads through the street.
We all gets moved out of the flat, and then next hour or so, turns out she's been murdered in a battle. We never, ever thought for a second that there was a murder. We just generally thought there was a fire. Not something you expect to happen on your doorstep. It's just crazy.
In the quaint market town of Boston, Lincolnshire, the usual tranquility has been disturbed by the sirens of fire engines, and neighbours on Elizabeth Road are stunned to learn that not only was the fire set deliberately, but that 33-year-old Marina Ertey has been brutally murdered.
The residents were shocked to learn that it was a murder because initially, like everyone else, they thought it was a fire.
Everybody was in shock. You just didn't know how to get your head around it.
There was always a police car parked just there on the side.
Constant flashes, weren't
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
Forensic cameras, it was just unreal, wasn't it?
It's just not what we expected at all.
It is a quiet area, so for something like this just happened, like, I think it did shake everybody up, to be honest.
When a crime like that hits Boston, it's very painful to hear. Some Bostonian people, they do feel afraid, they feel afraid going out. It just brings this grey shadow over your community.
As Marina has been senselessly attacked in her home for no apparent reason, the community is on high alert.
The people of Boston feared that there was a killer at large.
It was scary. There was always that worry of somebody coming back. They could have potentially took more lives.
It isn't long before Marina's family and friends learn of the brutal attack on their loved one.
Someone texted me saying that the fire brigade and police is there, so she's been killed.
I was in shock. I couldn't believe. It was my birthday, so obviously from very high happiness I went in deep sadness and proper shock. I thought, what? Is that really possible?
With a murder investigation underway, police need to establish a timeline of Marina's last known movements.
There's all sorts of inquiries that need to be made. We would have people immediately looking for CCTV in the area. We'd have people very, very quickly knocking on doors to find out who's been seen in the area, who hasn't. We need to find out when this happened, because that's the starting point, isn't it? When was she last seen, and who was she last seen by? Also, where she worked, who she would normally work with, when should she have been in at work last?
Officers speak to Marina's colleagues at the fruit packing factory where she worked and narrow the time frame on her last known movements.
Police discovered Marina hadn't turned in for work 5 o'clock that morning. So clearly, whatever had happened before that time. And that's absolutely key part of the investigation.
Back at the scene, police and fire experts examine the cause of the fire and quickly establish it had been purposely set after Marina had died.
The early forensic evidence showed that a fire had been set in the flat, but it didn't take properly, so the house wasn't badly damaged by fire.
The fire didn't really take, I think it was just slow burning. But if they'd done a good job on the fire, it could have just took this whole block. That was scary.
With the fire having been set after the attack, detectives speculate whether Marina's killer had tried to destroy evidence at the scene.
They won't have known if they left any forensic evidence there. They won't have known if they left any fingerprints there. They won't have known for sure that someone didn't see them either going or coming back.
Forensic experts are called in. They need to examine the scene to find any clues that might point to Marina's attacker.
When we got there, it was obvious that I wasn't able to do my job. The reason I couldn't do it is because the fire that was started on the stairs had produced a certain excessive amount of soot throughout the flat. And the whole flat was covered in a thin layer of soot, which meant you couldn't see the blood. So at that point, after a brief look around, and we did locate some bloodstains, but it was obvious that the extent of that was much more than what we could see. We decided to go home and have a team of people come in and de-soot the scene, and then us to go back after that process has been done.
Forensics must wait until the thick layer of soot is meticulously cleared before they can work. But detectives do manage to question Marina's ex-husband, Gytis, he says he hasn't seen her, but reveals some information which leads investigators to look deeper into Marina's personal life. And they uncover some disturbing connections to some violent people.
Following the ending of her relationship with Gitas in 2015, she'd formed a new relationship. And it was quickly discovered that she had been involved in a very recent trial at Lincoln Crown Court. She had been charged with perverting the course of justice after her new partner was involved in a violent attack on another group of East Europeans.
The man in question is 42-year-old Alexandra Kudryasov.
Alexander, he worked at the same factory as well. Alexander was involved in what's it called, criminal activity and deviant behaviours and everything. He's got quite a rough background.
Police found out that a new boyfriend had recently been sent to prison for 18 years for grievous bodily harm, dreadful attacking involving knives. And Marina herself had been acquitted for conspiracy to pervert the course of justice in providing him with an alibi, only a matter of days before her body was found. Clearly, it was an obvious line of inquiry that her death might be something to do with those circumstances.
Police want to know, was Marina's involvement in a gang dispute anything to do with her death? Could this have been a revenge attack?
One theory that the police would have been exploring is that maybe one members of the group that were the victims would exact revenge on Marina's partner, and the fact that he'd been convicted and was now out of the way meant that, of course, there was no one to protect Marina at the time.
Police explore the possibility Marina had become mixed up with a bad crowd through her relationship with Alexander. The theory of a revenge attack takes hold, and the safety of Marina's friends and family becomes a police priority.
The fact that a group of East European men have been very, very badly injured by another group of East European men, obviously down in Boston, there would have been tensions between the various people involved, the various families.
Clearly, one of the concerns for the police initially was the welfare of the child, and any other family members as well.
As police make sure Marina's loved ones are kept safe, post-mortem results arrive which offer clues to her attacker.
Marina had suffered traumatic brain injury, and she had fractured eye sockets and other injuries.
We know that it wasn't a knife used. It could have been done with fists, kicking, or a blunt instrument.
It was clearly a very violent and cold-blooded killing.
And with the scene now cleared of soot from the fire, forensic results arrive, which further paints a horrific picture.
What we found was a large pool of blood in the living room with smears around it, and there were small spots of blood radiating from it, indicating that there's been impacts in that area, probably into Marina herself. I suspect that she's gone into the living room for whatever reason, been hit, gone down almost straight away, and then been assaulted on the floor by punching or kicking or with a blunt instrument.
Forensic results also show bloodied track marks from the living room to the bathroom.
The two track marks is where her heels were in contact with the ground as she's been dragged across the landing and into the bathroom. In the bathroom, there were spatters of blood around the bath and on the floor to indicate that she'd been further assaulted in that area. Her body was found naked in the bath. There was no blood-stained clothing, so when it happened, she was most likely naked. And the pathologist said that Maria had actually been drowned by having the shower head forced into her mouth, and it was that which actually killed her in the end, was the cause of death.
But who could have carried out such an horrific attack? Had Marina become sucked into a gangland dispute and paid the ultimate price for it.
We'd heard that she had gone to court to do with this gang-related thing.
Yeah.
We thought she'd just got her. They'd found out where she lived and got her.
In the Lincolnshire town of Boston, police are investigating the murder of 33-year-old Marina Urte, who was found in her own home beaten and drowned in the bath. Her boyfriend, Alexandra Kudryasov, is in prison, serving an 18-year sentence for a vicious attack during a gangland dispute. Whilst he is ruled out as a suspect, there are suspicions that Marina has been murdered in a gangland revenge attack.
After it happened, we used to see this really spruced up black car coming past. We kept thinking, oh, is this to do with, like, this gang-related thing? That's pretty much everybody's first thoughts, wasn't it?
But police are keeping an open mind.
It's the age-old adage, ABC of investigating. Accept nothing, believe no one, and check absolutely everything. If it was anything to do with the grievous bodily harm trial and Marina being acquitted of conspiracy and almost a revenge attack by perhaps those people that had been the victims in the first place, one would expect it to be almost tit for tat. Revenge is usually about, I'm going to give you what you gave to me. That's what revenge is. Revenge doesn't normally extend to attacking a defenseless woman in her own home, viciously and violently over a prolonged period of time. That, to me, was not a revenge attack.
Police also suspect that the lack of a forced entry points to a different explanation.
That immediately means to me, this is personal. That would be my first thought there. This is not a random attack. This isn't a burglary gone wrong or anything like that. This is personal, for some reason or other. Whoever did this to Marina knew her, and Marina knew them and had let them in the house.
With this latest theory, police look closely at Marina's inner circle.
One of the key elements is always to find out who saw the victim alive last.
Police would have been looking to question those who were closely connected to Marina. That would have been her former partner and her former husband, also her sister who lived nearby. As every police officer knows, most murders are committed by people known to the victim, so it would have been their primary avenue of inquiry.
As Marina and her ex-husband Gytis had shared custody of their daughter, police question him about the last time he saw her.
Under questioning, Gytis did disclose his movements on the night and day before the murder. He disclosed that he'd been celebrating his birthday.
He immediately said, yeah, Marina had come to his house, had then gone to a supermarket and bought some whiskey, and then gone back to her flat.
This would have been late in the evening into the early hours of the next day. And he said that he left Marina's flat at 2 o'clock in the morning and that when he left, she was fine.
They had a pleasant evening, they'd had a few drinks, but there was nothing else. He was saying, it's not me.
With Gytis admitting to being with Marina on the night of the murder, but claiming to have left on good terms at 2 a.m., investigators have little else to link him to the murder.
That he'd said that he'd been at the flat the night before. That poses actually an interesting dilemma for a senior investigating officer. Is what do you do with that? It's only suspicion. There is no hard evidence. You are hoping you're going to find some hard evidence through maybe forensic examination of the scene, CCTV, or anything like that. But that takes a long time.
Even without evidence against Gytis, police need to act fast in case he is in any way connected to the crime.
As the senior investigating officer, it's your decision whether to arrest a suspect, and not only whether to arrest a suspect at that time, when you do it and under what circumstances. The senior investigating officer in this case took the view that it was the most advantageous way for the investigation was to make an early arrest.
Gytis Griskevicius is arrested on suspicion of the murder of his ex-wife Marina.
It won't have been an easy decision. There would have been a train of thought undoubtedly about, well, there's no evidence here that he's involved. There will have been opinions within senior officers, probably more senior than the SIO in this case, that he shouldn't have been arrested. We would know that we'd only be able to keep him in custody a maximum of 24 hours, and if no evidence came forward during that period of time, he'd have to be released. So it's not a straightforward decision.
With the time ticking against them, police further question Gytis under caution.
He gave the same story as he'd done before he'd been arrested, that he'd been there with Marina voluntarily, he'd left around 2 o'clock in the morning, and she was fine when he left her.
But with Gytis now in custody, police can delve deeper into his life to find any evidence that might connect him to Marina's murder.
Once we arrest him, the purpose of that is to enable the police to search the house, search his vehicle, search him, examine him for any injuries.
On closer examination, officers notice an injury on Gytis's right hand, which he explains was caused by an accident. Despite the suspicious injury and Gytis being the last known person to see Marina alive, the police have no further evidence. And Gytis has been in custody for almost 24 hours.
One has to make a decision. Have we got enough evidence here to charge him? Clearly they hadn't.
Gytis is released on bail.
The news obviously left question marks for people in the area. Was this the man? Had they caught the killer? Or was the perpetrator still at large?
Police now move their focus away from Gytis and cast the net wider. They trawl through hours of CCTV across the local area in hopes to find anything that might lead them to Marina's killer.
They would have trawled hundreds of hours of CCTV.
CCTV examination is an art form. It isn't just a straightforward process. It can take weeks and weeks and weeks to do it methodically. Some of the bigger police forces these days have dedicated teams whose sole job it is to do that.
And after hours of examination, police find footage from the early hours of the 20th of May, the day Marina was thought to have been murdered. And it places Gytis back in the frame.
They managed to find him on CCTV.
The footage shows Gytis running towards Marina's house at 9:30 p.m. Rather than he had claimed, heading there with Marina after a party at his. Then, 2 hours later at 11:30 p.m, Marina and Gytis are seen together at a nearby supermarket. And then, crucially, he is caught on camera returning to his house much later than 2 a.m, the time he told police.
So he had not left Marina's home at 2 o'clock in the morning and gone straight home. He was seen around 7:30 in the morning, and I believe he got back to his own premises around about 8 o'clock in the morning. So straight away they know he wasn't where he said he was, when he said he was there. The story he gave from the outset was a pack of lies.
The CCTV footage disproves Gytis' story and places him near to the scene on the morning of the murder. But the police still need more evidence to strengthen their case.
The police would then start thinking, well, how can we bolster this circumstantial evidence?
The police then begin to find other pieces of evidence that link him to the murder. A pair of his shorts were found in his washing machine, which he was seen to be wearing on CCTV.
And lo and behold, no blood was found on the shorts or anything like that. But the police would then say, well, where's the hoodie that he was wearing? Where are the T-shirt that he was wearing? Where's his footwear? Where are his socks? None of which was ever found. The fact that he couldn't account for that, again, just adds to the circumstantial evidence.
Gitis's phone is seized and searched, which raises further suspicion.
They found he had inadvertently wiped all the data off his phone.
The police believe Gitis deliberately wiped his phone to hide incriminating messages. But with the only evidence being circumstantial, and forensic results from the scene showing no strong link to Gitis being the killer, will it be enough to charge him for murder? Or will the theory of a gang-related revenge attack for the crimes of her boyfriend hold the truth to the killing? Lincolnshire police are investigating the murder of 33-year-old mum Marina Urte. And although they have circumstantial evidence that links her ex-husband Gitis Grickevičius to the crime, they are lacking forensic evidence. Meanwhile, her new boyfriend is serving 18 years in prison for a violent assault on a rival gang, and there's a theory Marina could have been killed in a revenge attack. Then the police make an announcement. The Crown Prosecution Service has decided to send the case to trial. And it's Gitis they believe is the killer.
Following the CCTV and other pieces of evidence, Gitis was rearrested and charged with the murder.
Gitis pleads not guilty. And with the evidence being mainly circumstantial, the police have their work cut out to prove there is enough to convict him.
Certainly the lead-up to a trial for murder involves a phenomenal amount of work. Making sure the evidence is presented in the correct fashion, making sure witnesses turn up. My feeling at the beginning of every murder trial I've been involved in was a fear of being perceived to have let the victim and the victim's family down. They are completely beholding upon you as an individual to bring some justice for their loved one.
In March 2017, the trial into Marina's murder begins at Lincoln Crown Court. And as Marina's friends and family enter the courtroom, they come face to face with her alleged killer.
When I came in, he looked at me with the eyes full of almost tears, and he looked at me as if I didn't do it.
As the trial begins, Marina's close friends reveal to the court details of her relationship with Gitis.
I remember she came to me when she was already heavily pregnant, and she was complaining that she's put on so much weight and Gitis is not happy anymore because she's not in the same shape as before. So I did notice that something was off. Why would you judge your wife for being a bit overweight when she's carrying your child?
And as time went by, the relationship continued to break down.
Then Gitis stopped investing into the family, doing anything around the house. And she would work and she would take all overtimes. So sometimes she would go weeks without a day off. And she would mention to him, maybe you should work more, or maybe you should at least wash the dishes. Then he would turn it back on her and humiliate her in terms of the weight or how she looks.
Marina then began to consider a life away from her husband.
She said to me that she wants a real man who'd take care of her and she would feel loved and cared for.
And in 2015, Marina broke off the relationship. And it wasn't long before she met her new partner, Alexander.
Marina was very happy. She said that I finally feel like a woman and I finally feel like I've been cared for. He gave me a perfume, and she said that over all these years with Gitis, he never gave her anything like that. She felt so much appreciated.
And friends revealed to the court that Gitis did not take Marina's new relationship well.
Piskevicius was still besotted with Marina. They'd split acrimoniously, but he still harboured a desire to get back with her. And he hated the fact that she was now with someone else.
He was described as being very jealous about the new boyfriend.
I met with him a few times on the street, and he said, how could she leave him? Because he's so good in bed. So he was not even thinking about the quality of life. He was raging about if his size is larger than his, how could she swap me for someone else?
But when Marina was arrested for perverting the course of justice, Gitis decides to use their daughter as leverage to get her back.
When police come up and arrested her, she didn't have a passport, she lost the job, and she didn't have a place to live. She lost everything, and in that moment, he got the girl.
She was praying and hoping that everything was gonna work out so she could then finally reunite with her daughter.
When she was fully acquitted of any wrongdoing, Marina asked to be reunited with her daughter. But Gitis refused.
I told him that you probably ought to allow Marina see the child, at least under the supervision of social workers in the children's center once a week for a few hours. She's probably missing her mother, and he was absolutely reluctant to do that, and he mentioned that we don't even mention mother's name in the house. Her girl was not allowed to pronounce her name in front of him.
He was sending her nasty messages about the girl, like no money, no honey, asking for money. Then he was taking girl out from the country, which she supposed not to do, and then posting in a Facebook saying, oh, hello, we are here. That was very nasty.
And things only got worse for Marina.
Marina had made all sorts of complaints against Piskevicius. She couldn't prove any of them. I think her vehicle had been damaged, she'd had a pedal bike stolen. She didn't know that it was him for sure, but she thought it really was, and it frightened her. There were a couple of occasions when she went to the police because he was seen filming her on his mobile phone, arriving at her house unannounced, and it spooked her to such an extent she went to the police.
I think Marina had confided in certain friends that she was worried that Gitis was stalking her.
She rings me one day, she says, he was standing on the corner of the street looking at the house.
However, in the last few days of Marina's life, hers and Gitis' relationship seemed to rekindle.
They restarted the communication. She rang me and she was so happy to say, oh, you don't know what just happened. I will see the child soon and he's talking to me in a nice way. And she was willing to resolve the conflict for her, for the daughter, and for him, for Gitis even. Just before the day, she rang me and she was very excited. And he said that he loves me and he wants to get back. He's the father of my child. Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. And he wants to come over. He wants to celebrate his birthday with me. And I did tell her, do not meet him on your own.
Piskevicius was still besotted with Marina. I think he saw an opportunity there to say, right, I'm the father of your child. This is my birthday. Let's celebrate together, give it another go, and rekindle our marriage.
Back in the courtroom, it appears with only circumstantial evidence, Gitis could still walk free. But then a new witness takes to the stand and flips the case on its head.
This individual contacted the police and said, this guy admitted to me what he'd done. He admitted to me that he'd murdered Marina, and then he admitted that he'd set fire to the premises. And I'm prepared to give evidence to that effect.
After a grueling 2-week trial at Lincoln Crown Court, the jury returns its verdict. Gitas Griskevicius is found guilty of Marina Erte's murder. He is sentenced to life with a minimum of 23 years in prison.
The guy came and gave his evidence, and obviously the jury took it on board, and ultimately, with that and with all the circumstantial evidence, unanimously convicted him of murder. He's got to spend 23 years in jail before he even becomes eligible for parole. That's a long time by anyone's book. But you know, he committed one of the most horrific crimes you could imagine. On a defenceless mother of his own child, my view is that he deserves every one of those 23 years.
But why did Gitas decide to kill Marina? On that fateful night on the 20th of May 2016.
I think it was about the fact that she was shunning his advances. Even though her new boyfriend was going to be in prison for 18 years, she still wanted to stick by him. He couldn't bear the thought of that. And I think he thought, well, if I can't have you, no one else can.
I think Gitas was jealous and had been humiliated by the new relationship, and that was his motive for the murder.
He'd taken the poor woman, battered and beaten, from one part of the flat to another, where he attacked her again, bundled her into a bath, and then drowned her with a hose. I mean, how callous and calculating can he get?
And for Marina's neighbours, her killing still haunts them to this day.
I always get the question, did you not hear anything? I'm like, no, I didn't. I'm like, so wish I did. It was in my mind for a very long time, thinking, why the hell could I not just hear anything? And then maybe we could have given her some hope. No matter how much danger I'd be in, I would have busted through the door and tried to help. 100%. If I'd have heard anything, I'd have gone straight in there and tried to help her. Even though I'd be putting myself at danger, I'd still help her, because nobody deserves to lose life like that.
And for Marina's friends and family, with the case behind them, they are slowly coming to terms with a life without her.
The biggest thing I miss about Marina is her liveliness. She was very, very positive girl, full with ideas, full with life.
I miss everything about her because I don't have anyone similar to her. She was a very good friend, and in my difficult situations, when I'm so upset and I'm so down, I know that she would be the person to turn to. She would just tell me, everything's gonna be all right. Don't worry about anything. Everything's gonna be perfect. And she had so much power in these words that I would straight away feel better. Yeah.
Stranger danger is rare but not impossible. The chilling Murdered at First Sight is new Wednesday at 9 on Sky Mix.
Police switchboard.
Hello, I want to report a missing person. She's my children's mum, and when me and the kids woke up in the morning, she wasn't there, but her car's still outside.
Has she had an accident somewhere or some kind of medical episode, come to some harm where she can't raise the alarm herself?
Half the time they've been found safe and well. I thought she might have just gone for a nice little weekend away somewhere.
The days went by and we started to realise that something had probably gone wrong.
You just instinctively know that something's wrong, something's not right.
You are under arrest on suspicion of murder of Sarah Welgreen.
In the middle of the Kent countryside lies the quiet residential area of New Ash Green.
New Ash Green was built in the 1960s and 70s as kind of model village. It's a sort of nice bit of suburbia that's been plonked in the middle of the Kent countryside. Nice place to live, bring up families, there's sports clubs, pretty quiet. There is quite a strong community there. Everyone knows each other and supports each other.
It was the perfect community for popular beautician Sarah Welgreen to set up home with her growing family.
As a daughter, Sarah was everything you could wish for. She was caring, she was incredible fun to be with. Brilliant company on it, you know, we used to love going shopping, ate for lunch, going on holiday together. She was feisty, she was very caring, and she'd always, she'd always stand up for the underdog. Loved her children without question, always there for them. What else can you say?
I lived in the same house for the entire time I was in secondary school. I've always been close to my mum. If I ever needed anything or needed someone to speak to, she would have always been there for me.
As well as sons Jack and Lewis from a previous relationship, Sarah also had 3 children with Ben Lacombe and dedicated her time to her family.
Sarah worked incredibly hard for her children. She had her day job, but she also had clients in the evening and at weekends, so she had her official clients at work, she had unofficial ones, and everything she did for her children. If you went out shopping for the day, invariably, the money would be spent on the children. She always made sure they had good holidays, Halloween, Easter, birthdays, never missed a thing.
My mum, she always used to provide for us. She'd rather go without and see us have everything that she could give us, really. She'd always put us before herself, and it really did make her a good mum. It was great. I was proud of how she was and the woman she was.
The couple's dedication to their children meant that when their relationship broke down, they decided to do what was right for the kids.
They were going to co-parent the children together and just have different rooms in the house and just bring their 3 children up together in a household where they'll have their mum and their dad.
Despite the unconventional setup, it worked for both Sarah and Ben, and both started dating once again, with Sarah meeting Neil on a dating app in 2016.
She'd met Neil, who lived in Farnham. They were quite happy.
I did like Neil, and yeah, from the times I met him, he was a nice bloke. Neil did love my mum.
The couple soon got engaged, and there was more exciting news to come.
In October, she phoned me up. She was really, really happy. She's just got this brand new job, pays more money, she'll be better off, the kids will be better off. She'll be able to help me out more with anything I need. So she was really excited to start it. So everything was looking up for her.
And she was absolutely thrilled to bits with it. She couldn't wait to get started. And that was, like she said, it's in the next phase of my life now.
On 9th of October 2018, just before 8 p.m, Sarah returns home from work still on a high about the new job offer.
She'd come home and she'd been seen arriving, went into the house. She went to bed, texted a boyfriend, sent a few text messages to other people. She told a friend that there's always something to look forward to. You've just got to open your eyes and dream.
The following morning, Sarah's boyfriend Neil texts Sarah, yet he doesn't receive any reply. After a few hours, he calls Sarah's ex, Ben, to ask if he knows where she is. But Ben tells Neil he thought she was with him.
Neil hadn't heard anything and wasn't getting responses back from Sarah, which was unusual. So he had phoned Sarah's parents.
Neil rang me and said, I've been trying to get in touch with Sarah. She's not answering her phone. And I thought, well, Sarah could be a bit scatterbrained. Either her phone would be out of charge or it'd be unplugged or she'd leave it in the car. So I tried to ring her a few times and then I thought, well, when Neil said he couldn't get hold of her, to be honest, I thought maybe she doesn't want to talk to you because it could be a bit intense.
She might have just been ignoring him to begin with, which she could do. So when I tried getting hold of my mum and she wasn't picking up her phone, I'd try through Facebook, texting, phoning some more, just any possible way out to get hold of her. Like tried her other phone, her work phone that she had, but nothing.
The following day, Ben reveals Sarah's still not returned home, and concern for her well-being starts to grow.
Messaged her again and tried WhatsApp, and then I thought, no, this is really, really odd.
I became quite worried because I just wanted to know if she was all right. It's my mum, like, it's the person who's brought me up for my entire life. I just wanted to know that she was okay.
After 48 hours and still no sign of Sarah, Ben decides it's time to call the police.
Kent Police switchboard.
Hello, I want to report a missing person.
Okay.
She hasn't gone missing before. She lives with me. She's my children's mum. She came home Tuesday night and then we all went to bed. And then when me and the kids woke up in the morning, she wasn't there. But her car's still outside.
On Thursday, the 11th of October, Ben Lacombe contacted us to report Sarah had gone missing. He told us that he'd come home from work. He said Sarah had come home just before 8 o'clock and she had gone to her room and she had settled herself into her room, which was on the first floor in their house. They stayed in separate rooms in that house. He told us that after putting the children to bed in the evening, he went to bed himself in the loft converted bedroom. And he said he went to sleep, had a full night's sleep. He'd woken up in the morning and found that Sarah's car was still at the address, but she was missing. After Sarah had been reported missing, officers attended the address and we began a missing person investigation.
Officers turned to Ben for help to piece together Sarah's last known movements, but he said he fully expected to see her the next morning, as it was a special occasion.
He wasn't expecting that Sarah would be gone. In fact, that day was one of their children's birthdays, and they had plans, and he'd expected her to be there.
Officers carry out a routine search of Sarah's bedroom and immediately notice something.
What we did find was that Sarah had left behind not only her car, but her car keys, her house keys, her purse, her cash, her bank cards, her handbag. In fact, everything that anybody could tell us that Sarah had was still at the address. Certainly, it looked like she'd gone out without any planning, leaving everything behind.
Concern was now growing.
There was no way she'd have gone out and left her keys behind.
The minute I'd realised that she'd left her handbag behind, the purse, car keys, and so many other things that
Bank
Sarah,
cards.
of all the people, would never have gone without any of those things.
For somebody that's gone missing, to have left all of those items behind was really strange and really concerning.
You just instinctively know that something's wrong, something's not right. Something's happened to her.
In the quiet suburban area of New Ash Green,
Concern is building over mum of 5, Sarah Wellgreen, who has been missing for 2 days. With her life seemingly looking up, a new job and a fiancé, police need to ascertain what would make her disappear. So establish a timeline of Sarah's last known movements on the 9th of October, the day she went missing.
It was a normal day for Sarah. She had taken her children to school that morning. She'd then gone out to meet some of her clients. She was a beauty therapist that used to meet some of her clients at their home addresses, so she went out and saw some of those people. And generally had what her family were telling us was a normal day. Sarah drove home and went into her home address. She'd settled herself into her bedroom. We know that she'd phoned her friend, and then she was settled down for the night.
When she disappeared, the next morning there was contact between various people who knew her. It was agreed that if she didn't return that day or by the next day, that Ben Lacombe would telephone the police.
Kent Police Switchboard.
Hello, I want to report a missing person. She's my children's mum.
Concerned that her disappearance was out of character, police issue a missing person appeal to the public.
Well, I first became involved when we received a press release from the police initially about a missing person from New Ash Green. They said Sarah Wellgreen had gone missing. There were concerns for her welfare. We get so many cases of missing people that you're probably not too worried to start with. Half the time before you've written a story, file copy about a missing person, the police will send something out saying they've been found safe and well.
But there was something more pressing for the police. Sarah had left her car keys and purse at home, leaving only a couple of scenarios to consider.
We thought maybe she'd gone out for a run and hurt herself.
Has she had an accident somewhere? Has she gone out and had some kind of accident or some kind of medical episode, come to some harm where she can't raise the alarm herself?
With the first few hours of a missing person investigation being critical, police launch a search perimeter around Sarah's home.
They set up a 5-mile radius around New Ash Green for the search effort, scouring woodlands, fields, sheds, wherever anyone could look.
I think they've done all the right searches they could within the area, you know, woodland, scrubland, the mud flaps. They've done all the right checks.
Desperate to reach out to his mum, Lewis turns to social media, and the village community immediately rally round.
Lewis put a call out on Facebook one evening saying his mum was missing and had anybody seen her? And I was thinking, oh, you know, something needs to be done. So I phoned the pavilion. They said, yeah, we can meet people there. We put a shout out on Facebook.
I think the whole village answered the call, really. Yeah. Everyone turned out.
The response I got from the post on Facebook, it went quite far, very, very quickly. It was shared hundreds of times. It got all over social media so quickly. And then it got put into the papers and everything like that as well, just from one little post like that. There was hundreds of people that went. Most of the village in New Ash Green went, and from the surrounding areas went as well. It did give me hope that I would be able to see my mum again.
The search began with combining the efforts of the police and the community, police leading it, of course.
We have walked and searched every piece of woodland, every field, every bit of grazing land.
There was a sort of lingering hope that she'd be found, you know, maybe she was injured or something, or, you know, something had happened, but she was okay, and that they would come across her. But the longer it went on, there was just no news at all about anything like that.
With no sighting of an injured Sarah within a 5-mile radius, police check her digital footprint for any clues into her whereabouts.
The police looked at her telephone evidence, they looked at billing data, they looked at banking evidence,
all various sources of evidence, looking at hospitals to see whether or not there was any trace of her.
There was nothing, no footprint at all digitally of Sarah from that point onwards.
With Sarah seemingly having disappeared without a trace, detectives tried to delve into her life.
We spoke to many people, her family, her friends, and other people in the community, people that Sarah had as clients. We were trying to build up that picture of Sarah. She was a happy person at the time. She had just secured a brand new job offer, which she'd accepted, which came with a fixed salary and a company car.
No doubt whatsoever that Sarah would disappear like that. She was so happy. We'd had a drink on the Friday, she was happy. She was full of life.
With all logical avenues as to Sarah's whereabouts exhausted, police start to suspect something more sinister has happened.
The days went by and we started to realise that something had probably gone wrong.
My suspicions became raised that something had come to cause Sarah some harm rather than Sarah having just taken herself away. I then was considering, well, who may have caused Sarah harm? Had Sarah gone out and met somebody that was pre-planned, and that person may have then caused Sarah harm? Had Sarah had somebody come to the address and he had taken her away?
But who would have done such a thing? Suddenly, everyone known to her is under scrutiny.
We actually had the police turn up at the house to see if she was there, and it's like, no, we, the ones who've got someone to phone you, she's obviously not here. But obviously they've got to do their job, they've got to come around and check all addresses that she might be at, things like that. So I understand, but turning up to the address where me and my brother are living.
Despite searching multiple addresses of family and friends, there is no sign of Sarah. And when they speak to Ben again, he admits that despite playing happy families, there's more to Sarah than meets the eye.
He went on to say that Sarah's life is a bit strange. It was a bit weird. He said Sarah often would go missing, would often disappear, would go away without telling us. That actually she would go off and meet other people.
Suddenly, police are met with an endless list of suspects. Did Sarah secretly meet someone she knew that evening? Police begin to look closely at anyone Sarah might be romantically involved with, including fiancé Neil, one of the last people Sarah spoke to.
The police came round with a search van on the Friday. They were there for a couple of hours because we sat down and they were asking questions, chatting about lots of different things, lots of possibilities, everything like that.
Neil tells police that he had a brief conversation with Sarah on the night she went missing.
That night I phoned her at 24 minutes past 9. We had a 15-minute conversation and then we exchanged a couple of texts after that, which was normal, and then we said goodnight.
Detectives check his phone records and confirm these calls, but he still needs to prove he was at home in Surrey when he made the calls.
I had my daughter, who at the time was 3, overnight anyway, and so they knew I wouldn't take a 3-year-old all the way over to Kent around the M25. As I said to them, look, if that's any concern, then just check the M25 cameras.
Neil's story is quickly verified, so attention turns to other friends and acquaintances.
We had a lot of people involved in Sarah's life, and we did a significant amount of work to show how they could not have been there that evening. They could not have been with Sarah that evening. And in all of the evidence that we found around Sarah, through her messaging, through her contacts, through her phone, we had nothing to say that Sarah had made any plans that night to go anywhere. There was nothing to say that she'd gone out.
1 week into the investigation, and Sarah remains missing.
You struggle to take it all in to begin with. There's just so many people trying to get hold of you, message you to make sure you're okay. It's hard to explain in a way of how it sort of makes you feel, because you're a mixture between angry, upset, worried, and you just want to know where she is. That's all it is. You just want to know that she's okay.
The desperate search for Sarah intensifies. Police trawl CCTV cameras from neighbouring homes in the village on the day Sarah disappeared.
We captured on CCTV some footage that we were able to see from a neighbour's address. Sarah drove home and she parked her car outside her home around 5 to 8 in the evening on that Tuesday. She then went into her home address.
Police keep watching the CCTV, and suddenly all becomes clear.
And it was from that moment that he became a suspect for potentially harming Sarah.
In the quiet residential village of New Ash Green, the community is desperately waiting for news into the disappearance of Sarah Wellgreen, who vanished from her home the night before her young child's birthday. Ben Lacombe says Sarah returned home from work and both retired to their separate bedrooms. When he woke in the morning, she had gone. But a neighbour's CCTV camera reveals something unusual at 2 a.m. on the night of her disappearance.
The CCTV imagery demonstrated captures of a vehicle which was in all ways similar to the vehicle driven by Ben Lacombe, and it had, because it was a taxi, a distinctive logo on the driver's side of the door. And one of the captures, although it was very grainy in the night, had a blur consistent with that same logo.
With some expert commissioned work around the imagery that we've got and comparing that to the vehicle itself, we had very strong evidence to say that that footage was that vehicle.
Believing the vehicle to be Ben's taxi, detectives trawl CCTV and ANPR cameras in the neighbourhood in an attempt to follow the vehicle's movements.
His taxi had been caught on CCTV cameras going out of New Ash Green and down country lanes, going south and finally at Plaxdale Green Lane, at which point it had kind of disappeared.
And then a little while later on, there were captures of an almost identical vehicle travelling back the other way. And that was key because there was no vehicle that went out and back in that way.
So we now had Ben Lacombe's vehicle on the move between around 2 a.m. in the morning to around 4:30 a.m. in the morning, the night that Sarah had gone missing. So why was Ben Lacombe's vehicle moving for 2.5 hours or so that night when he said he was alone, asleep in his own bedroom all night?
Despite neighbour CCTV capturing his vehicle return at 4:30 a.m, was it really Ben who was driving it the night Sarah vanished? Detectives rewind the footage to see if anyone else entered the property before Sarah arrived home.
Ben Lacombe told us that he'd come home from work. CCTV footage showed that he came home about 5:10 in the evening.
Detectives keep watching, but no one else is seen entering the property before Sarah arrives. But it was the neighbour's CCTV which flagged up another interesting detail.
Ben Lacombe had a sophisticated CCTV system installed at his own address.
From the neighbour's CCTV, we were able to see, going back and viewing 3 months' worth of footage, that the CCTV cameras on Ben Lacombe's house was on almost every single night running up to when Sarah went missing. And we know that because you can see the infrared lights of the cameras through the other footage to see when they're on and when they're switched off. So we know that after midnight, the cameras were switched off on Ben Lacombe's house.
With more and more discrepancies in Ben's account, police start to believe he knows more about Sarah's disappearance than he lets on, and start to piece together his movements.
we're able to show that when Ben Lacombe drove home from work the day that Sarah went missing, he'd passed some cameras and we could see that his car was spotlessly clean. The following morning after Sarah had gone missing, Ben Lacombe took the children to school, passing other CCTV cameras. Now that morning, the car is now dirty. There is mud up both sides of his car and around the tyres and the wheels of his car, but wasn't there when we saw him arrive home the day before. Around 10:30 that morning, he went to the office where his cab firm is that he worked for to see one of his colleagues. When we see it arrive outside that office, the car is spotlessly clean again.
It appears that on the night Sarah went missing, Ben Lacombe drove somewhere in his vehicle, resulting in it getting covered in mud. But there's a 2-hour window where the vehicle goes off radar. So where did he drive to? And where is Sarah? Having carried out some good old-fashioned detective work, and despite not having found a body, police make a decision.
So it was on the Monday, doing a formal review of what we had so far, that we moved the investigation from being a missing person investigation into the next day, when it became a homicide investigation.
They said they weren't going to do a television appeal, and I thought, they know something's happened. And Anya, you just know that you're not going to see her again. You know that.
Police believe Ben Lacombe murdered Sarah, but with no cause of death or clear motive, need to work harder than ever to build a case for an arrest. Phone records prove Sarah sent her final text at 10 p.m. Their home CCTV was switched off at midnight, giving Ben a 2-hour window in which police believe he killed Sarah, before putting her in his car and driving off.
The defendant having driven to some kind of deposition site, a grave where he had disposed of Sarah's body.
And then returned along the same route, where he's picked up again on CCTV. There was mud on his car the next day, which he had cleaned off promptly before going to the taxi office.
It was a pre-planned murder that Ben carried out. He killed Sarah. And myself and my team at the Major Crime Department, we instigated plans on that day to have Ben Lacombe arrested on suspicion of the murder of Sarah Welgreen.
Please, can you open the door, please? Morning. Morning. No baggage, please. Just sit up first, chest, hands with it. Okay. Right, sit up first and when you wake up and I'll explain what's going to happen. The time is 6:45. You are further under arrest on suspicion of murder of Sarah Welgreen. This is a further arrest on the discovery of fresh evidence. This evidence provides inconsistencies with statements provided when you reported the missing. Your arrest is necessary to allow you to be questioned about the offence. Understand? Understand that? Okay, you don't have to say anything in my harm defence. You mention and question anything later on in court. Anything you do say may be evidence.
When I found out that, he'd actually been arrested for murder, there's a feeling of anger, hurt, hate, all of the things that you'd associate with your partner being killed.
It's just a massive shock to the system. It's just unbelievable what goes through your mind. Now all the questions is where is she? What did he do? How did he do it? Did she suffer? Was it quick? You just don't know the answers to it.
Okay. So you are under arrest today on suspicion of the murder of your ex-partner. And I understand you still live in the same address, that's Sarah Welgreen. Now, as I say, you're here on suspicion of murdering her. We believe she may be dead, and that may be at your hand. So, did you kill her?
The pressure is on to find Sarah's body, establish a cause of death, and prove a motive to enable police to charge their suspect.
It was a vast operation, and one that has involved help from not only officers and staff from across Kent Police, but from across other forces nationally, using experts from the fire service, the marine unit searching water, searching confined spaces. We've searched around 1,400 different areas. We haven't found Sarah.
With searches proving fruitless and the clock ticking, detectives press Ben further.
So, I'm not clear at the moment, Ben, whether you're just trying to think of an answer or whether you've decided not to answer the question.
He remained utterly silent. He did not answer any of our questions. He did not give us any information. He stayed absolutely silent and stared at the floor through 7 hours worth of interviews.
After failing to answer any questions, and despite no body being found, police charge Ben with the murder of Sarah Wellgreen. But what really went on that night? And why did their once-loving relationship end in such a tragedy? In a Kent village, the body of mum of 5, Sarah Wellgreen, has still not been found, but police pursue a case of murder and have charged 38-year-old taxi driver Ben Lacombe.
It's hard to believe that it's happening to you. I know you see things like that, everything going on in the news and see it all in the newspapers and things like that all the time. You never think it will hit home, never, until one day it just turns up on your doorstep.
In September 2019, the trial into a no-body murder case begins at Woolwich Crown Court.
When you prosecute a case in which the body of the deceased has not been found, it presents unique challenges in the trial. And those challenges is to demonstrate that the defendant that you're prosecuting is responsible for killing the deceased.
The prosecution reveals to the court a conversation between Ben and police a few days before he was arrested.
We asked Ben Lacombe if we could take information from his mobile phone, and he said to us that actually he wouldn't give us his phone. It was very late. He wanted to go to sleep, and he would give us his phone the next day. As it turned out, and what we later captured on CCTV, was that Ben Lacombe didn't go to bed. He left the address. He travelled around and went into the Dartford and the Greenhithe area and parked up for a few minutes late at night near the River Thames.
There was CCTV footage of the defendant in the pouring rain, desperately trying to get rid of something. And the prosecution suggested that that was the defendant trying to get rid of his own telephone. We knew from other evidence that he had purchased a new telephone in the days that followed Sarah's disappearance. And he was obviously keen to get rid of his own telephone, a telephone which could have given the police an indication of his whereabouts on the night of the 9th of October.
The prosecution reveals further evidence linking Ben to murder.
Although the police didn't know exactly what had happened to Sarah's body, they knew that there had been a period of an hour and a half or so where that vehicle had disappeared. And it seemed likely that as part of the planning, Ben Lacombe had already chosen where it was he was going to dispose of Sarah's body. It may even have been that he had already dug her grave.
When we did a search of Sarah Wellgreen and Ben Lacombe's home, we found a very large shovel in his shed.
The defendant's account of why he needed a shovel of that type at his trial would later become that the shovel was there for his mother to use to tend to the flower beds at the front of his property. well, on any view, the flower beds at the property didn't require a shovel of that size, and the explanation given just simply wasn't a credible reason for having a shovel of that type. But it was a shovel that was relatively new in its appearance and was consistent with the type of implement that someone would use to dig a grave quickly.
Despite presenting their evidence to court, police still have no obvious motive as to why Ben would kill the mother of his 3 children. But as the trial unfolds, more information about the couple and their relationship comes to light.
Ben Lacombe was born in Greenwich, grew up in Charlton. Early 2000s, he moved to Mallorca, where he was hoping to find work as an airline pilot, or train as an airline pilot.
In December 2004, Ben met Sarah via an online dating site.
In the beginning, when Ben first met my mum, from what I could tell as a child, he was a nice bloke. From what me and Jack had seen, he was all right, he was nice. And everything seemed great, really, to begin with.
Desperate to create a stable home environment and provide her sons with a father figure and a better lifestyle, Sarah quit her job and moved to Mallorca to start over with Ben and her 2 sons.
Obviously, Sarah thought, oh, this is going to be a good life. You know, I really want to give this a try. And it did sound good.
But it became clear to the courtroom that their new life in the sun didn't work out as planned. Unable to speak the language, Sarah couldn't get a job and missed her family and friends back in the UK. Ben's dream to become an airline pilot failed to materialise, and instead he worked a low-paid airport job.
In the end, they moved back to England. By that point, they'd had their first child together, and they moved to New Ash Green.
The couple settled into village life. Sarah got a good job while Ben started working as a taxi driver. But cracks soon started to appear in their relationship.
They muddled along, arguing, bickering, fighting for months after that. And they finally split up. Sarah had made her mind up. She'd had enough.
But if Sarah thought splitting with Ben was going to be easy, she was mistaken. He threw her, Lewis and Jack out on the street, keeping their 3 youngest children inside the house with him.
I was angry with Ben, but that had been built up through a few months of just listening to the arguments and things like that, and then that just throwing us all out, it was just unfair on us, really. We had nowhere else to go.
The next morning, Ben already had a court hearing arranged, and he stated in court that Sarah abandoned her children. Could he have custody? And he was awarded custody. It was all pre-planned, and Sarah could not defend herself because she did not know what was happening.
Distraught that she no longer had access to her youngest 3 children, Sarah and her 2 eldest sons moved in with her mum and stepdad.
We were absolutely devastated. You see your child crying and you can't help them. And we literally scraped up everything we had to go and see a solicitor.
But things took a positive turn for Sarah in August 2016, when she was awarded full custody of the children. Not only that, she met boyfriend Neil. Despite this, Sarah was terrified that Ben would attempt to take the children away from her if she moved in with Neil. So she made an unlikely peace offering with Ben to raise their 3 children under the same roof.
Sarah wasn't happy about living with Ben. There was definitely animosity between the 2 of them. You know, they'd been together for a number of years. That didn't work out for various different reasons.
Yet Sarah had a plan: to buy Ben out of their 4-bedroom family home. And she soon secured a new job with a big enough pay rise to make this happen. And after arriving home from work on 9th October 2018, she tells Ben her plan.
Ultimately, Ben had lost control. The house was going to be put up for sale. He was going to lose his home, even though he was going to get half the equity.
And he'd lost not just, the property which he loved so much, but he'd lost control of the children.
When you look at Ben Lacombe, he would have been left with almost nothing.
Because he would have found himself in a position that Sarah was in not long before. And I think that probably pressured him into doing something stupid.
Ben was the only one that would have a motive for killing Sarah. Nobody else. Ben had everything to gain from getting Sarah out of the picture permanently.
After a gruelling 30-day trial at Woolwich Crown Court, the jury returns its verdict. Ben is found guilty of Sarah Welgreen's murder. He is sentenced to 27 years in prison.
"27 years for Ben Lacombe is not enough. Ben Lacombe should never see the light of day until he admits to those 5 children where he's put their mother. I've got one child who came home crying the other day because they wanted their mummy to pick them up from school one last time. So no, not enough.
The case of Sarah Welgreen is among a small number of convicted murder cases in the UK in which the victim's body has never been found. But the community has never given up hope of finding her.
We give the family hope that one day they will be able to find her, otherwise they've not got that hope to hold on to.
And that they know that we're still looking, and they know that we won't stop looking, do they?
It's not been forgotten.
No, not at all.
We would like closure. All of us would like closure. For the body to be disclosed, to have a proper funeral, will probably help us all put it to bed.
2 years on from her disappearance, Sarah's family are slowly coming to terms with life without her.
Ben's actions have caused me to lose my mum, for some of my siblings to lose their mother and their father at the exact same time. And it's just, it's an unthinkable thing. It really is. You never expect anything like this to ever happen to you, and you wouldn't wish it on the worst person. It's just a horrible, sunken feeling and just a hole in your heart that you'll never fill.
It is very raw. There's not a day goes by when you don't think about her, whether it's something that's played on the radio, or you see something, oh, Sarah would like that, or something the children say. Yeah, there is never a day goes by, and I don't think that will ever change for any of us.
And until she is found, the question remains, where is Sarah Welgreen?
Investigate an infamous case stage by stage to appreciate the full picture in OJ Made in America, available now on Sky Documentaries.
Police emergency, how can I help you?
It was a violent, frenzied and very, very aggressive attack. It almost severed his head.
If members of the public have any information at all, this was an 83-year-old family man. It was a brutal attack with no known motive at this time.
It's such a quiet and peaceful place. It just seemed incredible what could happen here.
This was the biggest manhunt.
From the instant I saw him, I realised he didn't fit in. I do regret not following him to see where he went.
Can you explain to me why your DNA is on that man?
East Harling, a quaint village nestled in the heart of the South Norfolk countryside.
It's a lovely little place to live in. It's really quiet, but it's got a lot of sense of community, a lot of pockets of very different helpful people, sports, and there's a couple of pubs.
Really nice place to live, safe place really. You know, everyone a lot of people know each other around here.
With its bountiful forests and country walks to enjoy a quieter pace of life, Harling and its neighbouring villages are the perfect places for many to set up home.
People usually say hello to you and you can stop and have a conversation. A lot of dog walkers in the area, of which I'm one. And, you know, they definitely always speak, pass the time of day with you.
Harling Heath, a really, really nice place to walk, and we use it for biking, running and dog walking.
The Heathlands, on the edge of the villages, has long been a draw for dog walkers. But this idyllic setting was shattered early one morning when a body was discovered in brambles on the heath.
Police emergency, how can I help you?
He was found by a couple that were walking their dogs. They saw his dogs walking without anyone, and then as they approached the scene, they could see some blood on the ground and his body partly covered by some brambles just off the pathway. The police were called.
I just remember it was a Saturday, I was at home, and I just remember hearing these police sirens screaming through the village.
They didn't actually come till the afternoon and arrived here. So all these police cars, all these police cars around for us, but it's quite bizarre.
Rumours about the discovery of a body in undergrowth fly through the villages.
An initial assessment suggested that he may have been subject to an animal attack.
One early theory was an attack from an animal, and that was mainly led from the extent of the injuries. Obviously, there's Banham Zoo, not a huge distance away.
I was very sceptical of that because we know what's in the woods, and I can't think of a wild animal that had been over there to do such damage, to kill somebody. There isn't animals over there to do that.
The news spreads among the local dog walking community. Could a wild animal really have attacked and killed a man on their doorstep?
There was a sense of fear, but that kind of not really believing it was going on in the village.
I think it was a bit of a shock to everybody. And it's not something that happens in this area. It certainly put us off walking our dogs there for a while. I had a young daughter at the time, she was only 3, and I wasn't keen on taking her there, you know.
Rookie journalist Zach Ward was one of the first to get wind of the story.
So at the time, I felt shocked, I felt surprised. This was my first job in journalism. It was our goal to try and handle it sensitively. The stories we normally covered at This Express were very community-based. They were human interests. It was about council tax going up. It was people's 100th birthdays. It was that level of local news. So when we say things like this don't happen, that's not a cliche, it's genuine. We had really very little experience in covering this major event.
Police finally identify the body in the woods as 83-year-old Peter Wrighton. But who is he?
Mr. Wrighton was retired. He lived with his wife. He had 2 dogs, one 13 and one 9 or 10 years old, that he walked regularly.
He had retired to Banham, which is about 5 miles as the crow flies to East Harling. He'd worked for BT for 35 years. He'd been married for 59 years, and he sounded like a gentle, kind, loving man. Loved his dogs. He was walking with Gemma and Dylan at the time, and they both stayed with the body. which I think that tells you the bond between dog and owner. But he sounded like a really well-respected member of the community, and we got an outpouring of tributes and sympathy once his name had been released.
The first time we moved in, we went and introduced ourselves to the neighbours. Peter and Anne were very, very welcoming. One of our first things to do was to invite them over for a meal.
They were always friendly. You'd go over there, they're always welcome to. And obviously they used to take their dogs out for a walk, both of them. And they loved dogs, so they took in a lot of rescue dogs.
Father of two, Peter was a daily visitor with his 2 dogs to the Heath, just a few miles from his home in Banham. Tragically, on the morning of his death, his wife Anne had gone in search of him when he hadn't returned home.
Been shopping, and on my way back, I was driving by, and Anne pulled out her car and drove towards Harling. I thought that was rather unusual for her to go out and leave the house empty without them being out together. I didn't think much more of it than that.
Mr. Wrighton had failed to return home, and Mrs. Wrighton became concerned and actually drove out to the Heath to look for her husband in case possibly he'd had a medical event or become lost. As she approached the scene, she made herself known to the police, who were already there.
While Peter's wife is escorted home, his body is taken for a post-mortem examination to verify the cause of death.
When the post-mortem took place, it was established that he had received quite a violent attack, probably initially from behind. Many of the stabbing injuries were to the back of his neck and a cut across his throat that actually cut all the way back to the spinal column. May have taken 4 or 5 sideways cuts. It almost severed his head. There were other significant injuries, a stab wound that went into his left eye.
The result immediately changes the course of the investigation.
We had a phone call from Anne informing us that Peter had been murdered.
But what had gone on? Why would someone want to kill such a well-respected member of the community in such a violent way? In the quaint countryside of East Harling, a post-mortem examination has just revealed that far from being killed by a wild animal, much-loved pensioner Peter Wrighton had been murdered. But why?
I think someone may have put a suggestion forward that it could have been as a result of an animal attack. But when you consider the circumstances, it would appear the way he had been deposited, he had been dragged backwards and his arms were on top of him, which would be unlikely if he was pulled there by an animal.
Mr. Wrighton had been stabbed over 40 times, including some very deep wounds to his throat, which had almost severed his head from the rest of his body.
It was a violent and aggressive attack with only one outcome likely with the way that he was attacked.
Immediately, a murder investigation is launched to track down the killer. And everyone is a potential suspect.
This was the biggest manhunt for a long, long time.
We've got additional officers in the local area at the scene of the murder. We've also increased our patrols and our police visible presence in and around East Harling.
They were very present, patrolling up and down the road. There was mounted police going around the village on horseback.
At the back of the forest here, the police stopped me all the cars. and asking you, what were you on that day, were you here, taking your name, address and so forth.
Police officers involved in the investigation will have been looking for dog walkers in the area. People have routines and return to places quite regularly, and therefore they will also have people on the heath at the same time, the same day, several days after, to pick up those who regularly go and may have been there in the morning.
As the police were searching the crime scene here, they cut all the grass down really short. All this field was cut very short. All the hedgerow here was cut down to virtually nothing. I guess they're looking for the weapon, I guess.
As news spreads throughout the local dog walking community that there's a killer at large, so does the fear.
When the murder investigation started, nobody was walking the dogs over the woods. They didn't know who it was.
When people first found out about the murder, then I think it was one of complete disbelief that something like that had happened in the area. And then I think probably naturally mixed in with a bit of fear around who was this person that had committed the crime, and were they still at large?
I mean, this was in broad daylight. This was at 10:30 in the morning, potentially. So I think afterwards people were wary. I think people were wary about walking their dogs on their own.
Police established that the 5th of August 2017 started out like any other day for Peter Wrighton.
It was a very typical day for him. He'd been to the shop earlier, he was walking his dogs.
Peter was picked up on CCTV at a local shop at 9:57 a.m. His car was spotted at 10:14 a.m, heading to the heathland to walk his 2 dogs. 30 minutes later, his body was discovered.
Police emergency, how can I help you?
Mr. Wrighton's wallet was still on him. His car keys were still with him, making it unlikely that it was a robbery. The heath really is a friendly area that people go for relaxation and just to walk dogs and just to get out and get some fresh air, etc. It's not somewhere where you would expect this level of violence.
Another potential theory was around other uses of the area. One dog walker who had used the area quite regularly had mentioned to police that he thought there was suspicious activity involving drugs and people buying drugs around that area.
Police quickly rule out a robbery gone wrong. So who would want to cause this quiet, friendly pensioner harm?
The majority of murders occur between people who know each other. And so an initial line of inquiry would be to establish those people who know him and anyone who may have any sort of grudge or dislike or whatever for Mr. Wrighton. You tend to work in concentric circles around the victim, and so you look very close and then you gradually branch out and expand your inquiry, eliminating people as you go.
Peter was quite reserved, he was quite quiet, because he was such a kind, gentle soul, and happily married to Anne. It didn't make any sense. How could somebody be so wicked? Do you pick on somebody so kind, so loving?
His son and daughter live away and could be easily established as not having been in the Norfolk area, so that would eliminate those family members. And therefore the police then need to look further outside the family unit and expand their inquiries.
You know, we tried to think about people that knew all of us. Could it be anybody that we knew?
Any other significant friendships or relationships before his move to the area?
And we came up with no's everywhere, so it had to be random.
With no obvious clues in Peter's past, police turned to the media and the public for help.
If members of the public have any information at all, and even if people think this is a small snippet of information, tell us, because it might be a small bit of information that's the final pieces of the jigsaw that we need. We're really, really keen for anybody that was in and around the area between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. on Saturday the 5th of August. This was an 83-year-old family man. It was a brutal attack with no known motive at this time, leaving behind a wife and children.
Another major line of inquiry is through the media to try to gain intelligence from and identify members of the public who may have been in the area at the time.
The police had appealed for information, and the initial amount of people coming forward with information was really, really high. We're talking about the hundreds.
It's important you get to people as soon as possible so that that image is as clear as possible in their minds.
Intensive questioning of local dog walkers starts to give police some leads.
That's the day of the murder. I came up the second day and the policeman said to me, "What are you doing here?" basically. I was a little bit scared because I thought perhaps maybe they would think it was me because my footprints would be on the soil here and everything and touch certain things, I guess, so forth. DNA, that sort of stuff, I guess. I don't know how that kind of works, but quite scary at the time.
Didn't sink in at first. And then when they're talking about, oh, it happened such and such, and I thought, well, I was in the forest then.
So as part of the appeals, initially the police were wanting to speak to 2 male individuals and gave very detailed descriptions.
Police rule out the 2 dog walkers. But Peter Bibby is pulled in for questioning.
I had an interview at work, an interview at home, where they took all fingerprints, DNA. That's it. Good boy. They even took DNA off the dog, took all my clothes. Good boy. Yeah, it was quite harrowing, but I suppose everybody's a suspect till you're proven innocent.
But unknown to Peter, something he had witnessed on the morning of the 5th of August was about to turn the investigation on its head.
It was a normal day over the heath. Met quite a few new people, which was quite nice, a few of the people that I used to know. Yeah, just a really nice, peaceful day. Yeah, this is the route that I took. I regularly walk this ridge, and this gate wasn't there at the time. So I would come along here, and then I turned down, then walked back through the woods in a round circle. Saw somebody walking towards us, and he just didn't look right. He wasn't dressed for walking in the forest. He didn't have a dog. He wasn't with anybody else. It was just totally out of sync.
Through their inquiries, they identified another person who'd been dog walking on the heath at the time, who had spoken to someone who seemed out of place. Didn't seem to be dressed to be walking, didn't have a dog. You know, dog walkers tend to, it's not a uniform they wear, but they tend to dress in similar ways and know who looks in or out of place.
On his feet, he had like heavy-duty flip-flops and a pair of shorts and a T-shirt. Very smartly dressed and was totally out of character for walking dogs in the forest. We were both walking up wheel ruts of a car. So I was walking up the right-hand one, he was coming down the left-hand one. When we actually passed, he was about this far away from me. I could have put my hand out and touched him. If I hadn't said hello to him, he'd have definitely walked past me and wouldn't have given me the time of day. There was no chance of any eye contact, not even any feinted little glances. He had his head forward and he was just walking forward and ignoring everything. And then he went on, and then I was wondering to myself, what's he doing? Where's he going? It's not right.
He provided an e-fit of this person that became very key to the investigation later on.
I do regret not following him to see where he went. Yeah. And that's sort of like bugged me for a while.
Suddenly, police have a description of a man they believe could hold the key as to what went on that morning on the heathland. They release an e-fit. But who is this man? And is he a killer? The rural Norfolk countryside is still reeling 6 days after 83-year-old Peter Wrighton was murdered on the heathland while walking his dog.
Shocking events such as these have a significant impact on the community. One of the first things the local police inspector will do is a community impact assessment to try and reach out to the community and reassure them that the police are doing as much as they can to protect them and to resolve whatever the incident is that's happened.
It's such a shock for this area because it's so safe and so sort of old-fashioned in a way. I guess you leave your doors unlocked, you have keys in your car, and no one expects you to get murdered. It's just quite bizarre. Afterwards, people are quite scared of walking the dogs in the forest.
Police still have no suspects, no murder weapon, and no motive.
I think any time there has been a murder in these sort of circumstances and no one's been found, there's likely to be wariness, there's likely to be some people who sadly won't want to leave the house. That shock was always there, I think. It was random, it was unprovoked, it literally could happen to anybody.
It wasn't safe for any of us. If there's a murderer already, it's murdered Peter. Was it something personal or not? We didn't know. After the murder of Peter, I was very reluctant to leave the house.
Having turned to the public for help, police receive information about a man who had stood out on the heath on the morning of the murder.
I just saw his feet first, and I thought he's wearing like heavy-duty flip-flops. It's not the sort of attire that you'd think of going dog walking. Pair of shorts on. Most people don't wear shorts through there because of the nettles, bits of bracken and all sorts of stuff like that. He was walking with a purpose.
Police release an e-fit of the man described, and suddenly there's a breakthrough. Police receive a tip-off about a local man, 24-year-old Alexander Palmer.
So, following the police appeals, a psychiatrist who had worked with Alexander Palmer then came forward with some concerns around previous things that Palmer had said.
The psychologist told the police that when treating Alexander Palmer, he had ideations of violent attacks, often with a knife.
Palmer had talked about his desire to attack random people. The voice in his head he called Little Alex.
Once Alexander Palmer was known to the inquiry, he was allocated to a team of detectives as a person of interest. Having obtained a photograph from Facebook, it was immediately apparent that there was a very strong likeness with the e-fit that had been provided by one of the dog walkers.
So at the time we knew that Palmer was 24 years old and he lived in Cringleford in Norfolk, and he had previously been a part of the armed forces.
Having identified Alexander Palmer as a suspect, an arrest strategy was prepared and he was arrested at 4:40 the following morning.
News of the arrest quickly spreads.
I wasn't sleeping. Quite paranoid about it all. I always kept looking at my iPad, to see if there'd been any updates. And I think there's one at 3 o'clock in the morning, the first published Alexander's name. So I quickly thought I'd have a look at Facebook. And lo and behold, there he was. As soon as I saw him on Facebook, I realised that was him. Without a shadow of a doubt.
After Alexander was arrested, they'd informed Anne, and Anne informed us that someone had been arrested for it, which was a relief for us.
As part of the arrest strategy, having been brought into custody, various forensic samples and a DNA swab will have been taken from Palmer, which will have been fast-tracked to the laboratory to try to get a profile as soon as possible. Having an outstanding profile from Mr. Wrighton's trousers, they need to know as soon as possible whether there could be any link to Alexander Palmer.
With forensic evidence being processed, Palmer himself is brought in for questioning.
Alex, can I get you to introduce yourself, please?
Alexander Hobbs Palmer.
As I said, an e-fit was prepared from a description. Have a look at that. What would you say about that?
That's a pretty good likeness.
Alexander admitted that he had been in the area at the time.
During the first interview, Palmer revealed that he had been in the area. He said that he had travelled there and feeling depressed, he had stood there and had cried to himself and had walked about and then returned to his car, parked somewhere separately and had another walk and then left the area.
He was quite adamant about it, that he had not done it. He was not the killer. There was a Roman road that dissected the wood, and Mr. Wrightson had been killed on the west side of the road. Alexander said that he'd been on the east side at all times. I found him to be pretty calm, composed. He was intelligent.
Despite Palmer's denials, on the ground, detectives worked tirelessly to find evidence to link him to the crime.
You're looking for something that will link him to the scene, something that will link him to Mr. Wrighton. So you're going to look for any clothes that have been worn at any locations that he's been to, so a house, lock-up, work, vehicles that he may have used, looking to seize as many items as possible to initially assess them and then send them for forensic examination.
And it isn't long before forensic investigations start to produce results.
It was the second day of interviews that the positive result on the DNA matching Alexander Palmer to the DNA profile found on the trousers, probably where he dragged Mr. Wrighton into the bushes, grabbing his trousers to pull him along.
What could be his DNA was found on Mr. Wrighton's trousers, and what could have been Mr. Wrighton's blood was found on the collar of a jacket that belonged to Alexander.
That was the main evidence to link Alexander Palmer to Peter Wrighton, and obviously that then entered into the interview strategy.
Can you explain to me why your DNA is on that man?
I'm afraid I can't without knowing.
You don't need to know. It's irrelevant where it is. You say you haven't met him. Why is your DNA on him?
For instance, I could have lost a hair follicle and caught on his shoe. That's just me speculating, but without knowing, I couldn't venture a guess.
Okay.
Police now have a DNA link between the two men, but need further proof linking Palmer to the crime.
A search of his car identified a map which had markings on it indicating the area of the heath, which is obviously of interest because it indicates some sort of pre-planning before going to the scene.
There was ANPR data, the number plate recognition, which put Palmer at the location at the day of the murder.
Some ANPR evidence had been recovered with Palmer driving his car in the morning when dropping his partner off in the city, which showed him apparently in a white or light-coloured shirt, and when he was seen picking her up in the afternoon, he was seen in a dark-coloured shirt. And yet his account was that he had been wearing the same clothes all day, but he appeared to have changed his clothing, and none of that clothing, which is highly likely to have been heavily bloodstained, was ever recovered.
Police believe they have irrefutable proof that Palmer killed Peter Wrighton, but they still don't know why or what with, and their suspect is now refusing to talk.
I'll ask you again, were you involved in the murder of Peter Wrighton? No comment.
He made it very clear that he was not guilty, was not responsible, and he hadn't done the killing. And that remained his position throughout.
Detectives analyse Palmer's phone records and come across a damning photograph.
It was established that he had bought a hunting-type knife, and in fact there was a picture of it, I think, on his phone. That picture of the knife was shown to the forensic pathologist, who confirmed that it could have caused the injuries.
Alexander Palmer is charged with murder. But what was his motive? And what drove him to kill? February 2018. And Alexander Palmer is standing trial at Nottingham Crown Court, accused of murdering Peter Wrighton in August 2017. A crime which had sent shockwaves through the small, close-knit community of East Harling.
I think my first initial thought was, whoever done this is a coward. The nature of the frenzy that murderer did, it was a cowardly act on an old man who's out walking dogs.
Totally shocked. I couldn't believe it because it's such a quiet and peaceful place. It just seemed incredible it could happen here. It just seemed impossible, really.
Prior to the court case, Palmer has to undergo psychological assessments to determine his capacity to stand trial.
I believe he's initially sent to Belmarsh Prison and then to Rampton for that assessment. And the question to be answered was Alexander Palmer mad or bad? Had he carried out this attack because of a mental illness that he was suffering from, or was he just a very violent and nasty person?
So who is Alexander Palmer?
When I first met Alexander, he was 24 years old. He'd been 23 at the time of the offence. He had no previous convictions, no cautions, no findings of guilt, no reprimands, nothing, so far as the police were concerned, that would suggest that he would commit such a violent offence. He'd served in the British Army till about 2015. He had trained and qualified as a commando, one of the few who actually qualified in his year. But there was one thing of note. In March of 2014, a fellow trainee had stamped on his head, and that was plainly the beginning of his mental problems. Because of that, he had been medically discharged from the army.
Throughout 2015, Palmer was treated as both an inpatient and an outpatient in mental health services, seen by several different psychologists, but one expressed concern to the police after seeing media appeals about the murder.
One of the people that contacted the control room was a psychologist who had worked previously with Palmer following an assault on Palmer whilst he was serving in the forces that had an effect on him.
And one piece of information comes to light which is particularly chilling.
The psychologist told the police that he had a dislike for dog walkers.
Dog walkers, he said, were a particular bugbear of his.
He was obviously suffering some mental health problems brought on by PTSD. He had some kind of grievance with dog walkers is the thing that stands out.
He had made disclosures about ideations around violence and a dislike of dog walkers.
Having been deemed fit to stand trial, the court hears how Alex had revealed on arrest that he heard voices in his head.
Palmer had talked about the voice in his head he called Little Alex.
Is there a different Alex? Times, yes. Okay, who's he? He used to manifest himself as a physical hallucination, but now he's just a voice. Is he still with us? Yes. Is he here today? Yes. Where is he now? What is him here? He's there, is he?
Palmer admits being on the Heathlands on the day of the murder.
So was Alex there that day? The other Alex? He's always there. So he's always there. So he would have been with you, okay? Was he? Do you remember him talking to you on that day? You don't. But you say he talks to you every day. Yes. He's there laughing at you. But you say he doesn't tell you what to do. He doesn't force you to do things or anything like that.
Palmer, during the court case, had said that he had visited the woodland because he was feeling low, but didn't say that he'd been involved in the attack.
But the prosecution puts forward evidence linking Palmer to Peter Wrighton.
Several of Mr. Wrighton's clothes were sent for forensic examination, and they had identified DNA from a person on the leg of his trousers.
I believe there was DNA found on Mr. Wrighton as well, which linked Palmer to the murder.
The court also hears that on the morning of the murder, ANPR cameras picked up Palmer's black Ford Focus on the A11, heading towards the Heath. Mobile phone records reveal he is stationary on the area of the Heath from 10:19 a.m. for a period of 32 minutes and 55 seconds. His car is then picked up heading north on the A11. The whole journey, police believe, had been planned in advance.
A search of his car identified a map with the area marked out.
In fact, investigations reveal Palmer had completed the exact same journey 2 weeks prior to the murder. Had it been a practice run, or had he intended to kill on that day? Either way, it was Peter who found himself at the end of Palmer's wrath on that fateful day.
Why did he pick Peter?
Being that Peter's about my stature and a bit older than I am, Peter was easy prey for Alexander.
But did Peter actually try to help this man? We don't know. Nobody will ever know. Because this man won't say anything now. Did Peter try to help him? Peter suffered for it. We don't know.
It was also revealed that despite his age and smaller stature, Peter had tried to fight off his attacker.
He had what we would refer to as defensive marks on his hand. It would appear that he tried to grab the blade of the knife to stop his assailant.
It was unprovoked, and he was a very, very old man that couldn't defend himself. Alexander's quite a strong lad, you know, military background, very fit and able. Peter Wrighton could hardly stand up. I think very cowardly.
The prosecution revealed further evidence that Palmer had planned to kill. Police had found a notebook in a storage facility belonging to Palmer, in which it appeared he had written of his plans.
So in January of 2015, he said he was thinking of going for dog walkers. He said that he hated dog walkers and that if he did this, he would be up on a pedestal, up with the big ones. Everyone would look up to him. Everyone would know his name.
But while police did discover the notebook, there's one thing they never did find: the knife he used to kill Peter.
The prosecution case would be the steps that he had taken to get rid of any forensic evidence would indicate a knowledge of what he had done and an intention to cover up what he had done.
On the advice of his barrister, Palmer does not give evidence in his trial.
I explained to him that it's his case, his future, his liberty that's at stake, and that we act as a voice for him in the courtroom.
The notebook, DNA, witness statements, and the EFIT, as well as Palmer's medical records, are put to the court.
The prosecution case was a strong one. ANPR evidence in relation to his vehicle and cell site evidence in relation to his phone showed that he had been in the area at the relevant time. In addition to that, there was evidence from 2 eyewitnesses who had given descriptions of the person who was likely to have been Mr. Wrighton's attacker. And those descriptions were quite similar to the appearance of Alexander. One of those two witnesses had made an E-fit, and again, the E-fit was quite similar to Alexander's appearance. There was no direct evidence, but if you put all those matters together, it represents quite a strong case.
Having heard all the evidence, the jury retire to consider their verdict.
The trial came to a conclusion and the jury found Alexander Palmer guilty of murder.
When a jury decides after 49 minutes, I think there's obviously overwhelming evidence to suggest that Palmer was the person who carried out the murder. That was the one thing that stood out for me at the trial, is how quickly they decided that Palmer was guilty of the murder.
Despite evidence of Palmer's mental health problems, the judge ruled that he had meticulously planned the murder.
The statutory sentence is life imprisonment, but there is a recommendation from the judge, which in this case was 28 years. I would suggest that the fact that once convicted and imprisoned, he was sent to a normal prison rather than a psychiatric prison indicates that the assessment was that he was a violent and nasty person.
Good girl, good girl. Come on.
The dog walkers of East Harling will never forget the horrifying crime which leaves its mark on this close-knit community.
Not the same in the forest here for months. People were not relaxed, very nervous, looking over the shoulder all the time. I was doing the same, actually, looking over your shoulder, seeing what cars were parked here. It was very bizarre, kind of chilling feeling afterwards.
And for Peter Bibby, his brush with evil will live with him forever.
It was quite a scary thing, and it's all the what ifs. What if I had gone back? You know, would have changed things. I was walking straight forward to him. It could have been me.
Investigate an infamous case stage by stage to appreciate the full picture in OJ Made in America, available now on Sky Documentaries.
Police, where's your emergency?
Hiya, who do I report a missing person to?
Who's actually missing?
It's my wife. She walked out early hours Wednesday morning and she ain't been back since.
It didn't add up. Why would she be gone for so long and why wouldn't she tell anyone?
Maybe she had mental health issues and she had enough.
Some people do find they can't cope with the pressures of life and wander off.
The police, they were searching the area with sniffer dogs, police helicopter.
It was much worse than we thought.
And I was like, am I under arrest then?
In the heart of the Kent countryside lies the quaint village of Northbourne.
It's a very picturesque village, very rural setting, close to the coast. And actually a lovely place to be. Lots of nice walks through the fields and woodland nearby.
Everybody knows everybody. There is that sense of community and a sense of it being a safe environment.
We have quite a nice village hall in a pub, surrounded by farmland. It's quite a nice, quiet place to live. Crime is not generally a problem here.
With such a welcoming community, it was the perfect place for Micah Cudworth to set up home.
Micah was born in Poland, but she came to live in Kent, and she came to see Kent as being her home.
She came over presumably to have a better life, to have a new adventure, and settled here and was well known and liked here.
She didn't come to England on her own. She was married before, and she came with the partner that she had at the time. But they separated, and she met Jonathan.
John was obviously a local lad and lived in this area all his life, as far as he went to school in the area, joined the military, came out of that eventually, and got a job here as a forklift truck driver.
Jonathan is a really sweet kid. He is really gentle, quite quiet, very reserved. And he came from a nice family. They were all good people.
With an opportunity for a second chance at love, in 2013, Micah and Jonathan tied the knot, and she found a safe haven with her new extended family in Kent.
Micah's family still lived in Poland. Her only family in England was actually Jonathan's family. She deemed her friends in England to be her family, so living and remaining here was important to her.
She was very involved with his family. They were like one big family, and I think she loved that. I think that's what her intention of coming here. She wanted that family sentiment, and, you know, she got that.
It didn't take long for the happy couple to settle in well to village life.
Mikey was beautiful, funny, fun-loving. She was just a real bright energy. She could make you laugh, make you smile.
They were an ordinary young couple which was missing in the village. So it was nice, it was a pleasure to see them.
Micah and Jonathan were a devoted couple.
As any normal couple would. They'd walk down to the end of the road. Micah would go rushing off wherever work. She'd always smile, she'd always, put her hand up. John, I would see occasionally on his way down to the pub, and occasionally on the way back from the pub.
And it wasn't long before Micah took up part-time work, which put her centre stage in the community.
She had a job as a barmaid in a village pub. You know, lots and lots of people would go in that pub. Quite a small size, but with a lovely big garden. And I think in that pub, it's very close-knit, it's very friendly. And to have had very friendly, bubbly and attractive barmaid there, she would have been a very well-known and very well-liked girl.
8 years since her move from Poland, Micah appeared happy with her life in the UK. But she may not have been as content as it seemed.
Kent Police, where's your emergency?
Hiya, who do I report a missing person to?
Who's actually missing?
It's my wife. She came home about 11:30 because she went to meet somebody for a drink. We had a little bit of a row and she stormed off and she ain't been back since.
So is she vulnerable in any way due to disability, mental health, or any other factors?
She has been a bit down lately.
OK.
Micah had gone out after work and had a drink with a friend. She'd come home late. They'd had an argument. She'd stormed off. The next day, she was still missing. And then the following morning, Jonathan reported her as missing.
Worried about Micah's whereabouts, officers do a quick search of the house for clues. They discover she had taken just a few essentials with her, keys and a handbag. But her car is still in the driveway, and her mobile phone is switched off. Concerned about her state of mind, officers speak to villagers for clues.
My neighbour next door to me told me Micah had gone missing. The police came round, explained what they were doing, interviewed us all.
Asking the questions. Have you seen anything? Have you heard anything?
But with no information from neighbours, concern grows as to Micah's whereabouts and her state of mind. Kent Police decide to issue a missing persons appeal to the public.
We received a press release from police to say that Micah had gone missing. It's human instinct, so it instantly struck a chord and we thought, something's wrong here. It didn't add up. Why would she be gone for so long and why wouldn't she tell anyone?
Naturally you think, God, this woman must be so unwell. Maybe she had mental health issues and she kind of like had enough and left the house in the middle of the night. It was sad.
Kent Police, where's your emergency?
Hiya, who do I report a missing person to?
Who's actually missing?
In the quaint village of Northbourne, unease is growing over Micah Cudworth's whereabouts. She's been missing for more than 24 hours.
In the village, there was a real concern as to where Micah might be.
From our point of view, it was a case each day we wanted to know where was Micah, had she been found.
Concerned about her state of mind, her loving husband Jonathan has reported her missing. Worried that her low mood had led her to look for comfort outside of the family home.
So is she vulnerable in any way?
No, but she has been a bit down lately.
OK.
You don't know, but it wouldn't be unusual. It could be some form of mental illness. Some people can't cope with the normal pressures of life and wander off.
Life gets difficult and life gets tough, which it does for all of us, and we all face challenging circumstances in our lives.
Having walked out in the middle of the night after an argument, the village can't imagine what's going through her husband's mind.
I actually reached out to John and said, hey, this is really terrible. And I remember saying to him, you know, just hang on, hopefully she's going to find her and she'll get the help that she needs.
After 24 hours with no contact from Micah and with no clues to her whereabouts, police start considering the possibility she could have harmed herself or met someone out to cause her harm. A full-scale search is launched.
Suddenly, lots of police vans turn up. From going from seeing no police cars or hardly any police cars to being descended on by police was a little bit of a shock.
The police, they were searching the area nearby. That was with sniffer dogs, police helicopter.
You bring in resources, dogs, police dogs, searching fields, especially in the rural area of East Kent, there's a vast amount of agriculture. You might get the helicopter camera up with the infrared to see if you can find someone in the field somewhere that's still alive.
Police continue to scour the surrounding areas and question Micah's family and friends. But it appears after walking out into the night, she simply disappeared.
Generally speaking, most missing persons turn up very shortly, certainly within, if not 24 hours sooner. This was then 30-odd hours. And then, of course, 36, 48 hours. And you always live in hope. But, of course, the longer it goes on, you always fear the worst.
As the days pass, husband Jonathan and the rest of the family desperately cling on for any hope that Micah will be found safe and well.
I was devastated for him. I felt for him, I felt for his family. I just wanted to help them, support them.
We responded as best we could, and the church was open. We had a small little area as a place where people could come for prayer and reflection.
As the local search fails to uncover any clue as to where Micah has gone, detectives decide to increase the media campaign with the hope of reaching out nationally and internationally.
Police are urging anyone who may have seen Micah Cudworth to contact them. The barmaid walked out of her home just before midnight on Tuesday and hasn't been seen since. Polish-born Micah from Northbourne was last seen wearing white trainers, grey tracksuit bottoms and carrying a black handbag.
When the police released her photograph, that's when the public interest really did peak. She looked like a bubbly, happy, kind and well-liked person. So the public interest really did come alive.
There was a lot of talk on social media. You can imagine when you live in these little villages, somebody goes missing and the local newspaper saying, have you seen this person? It was everywhere.
Media campaigns are important, and very often by media campaigns and using the local media especially, you get sightings. The trouble with sightings is you can very often get people ringing in with genuine callers who believe they've seen perhaps the missing person when in fact it's not them at all. So you have to be careful that you're not taking down blind alleys.
And the longer Micah remains missing, the more rumours start to circulate throughout the village.
I think Micah, in the crudest sense, ticked a lot of boxes. As a barmaid, she would have been very popular. She was pretty attractive and supposedly quite bubbly, so she will have been very liked.
Rumours are rife, and particularly in a village. People start talking, she was a little bit too fond of a customer down at the pub.
She was very friendly with certain individuals, and one man in particular, and it was suspected by some people that she was having an affair.
Could Micah be with this man? Had she walked out into the arms of a new lover? Suddenly, there's hope this could be the case. A post from Micah appears on social media, written in Polish.
Micah's friends had received Facebook messages from Micah saying, "It's okay, I'm all right, I just need some space." But that hope was soon dashed when the friends had spoken to police to say that the messages they'd received weren't quite grammatically correct.
Some of her friends were questioning the grammatical use of Polish. It wasn't her usual way of speaking, as it were, on messages.
They couldn't see that Micah would have written them like that, and something just wasn't adding up.
Clearly, if she was sending these messages out, they weren't being sent by her.
But if it isn't her, then who is writing these messages? Detective suspicion that something sinister has happened to Micah grows. And they widen their inquiries and home in on certain people.
The persons of interest would have been the man from the pub who was allegedly having an affair with her, and indeed any other customers that would be regular customers in the pub, because if she's having an affair with somebody, there'll be other customers in the pub who will be able perhaps to provide some significant information with regard to their friendship.
Police trace the man Micah is suspected of having an affair with. He admits he had a drink with Micah on the night of her disappearance. He is questioned. Concerned by the latest development, Micah and Jonathan's friends and family rally round him.
Jonathan had called some friends and asked them to come round and give him support. They came round and they spent time with him.
4 days after Micah was reported missing, Kent police make a shocking announcement.
Police investigating the disappearance of 36-year-old Micah Cudworth have said they've made an arrest. The barmaid from Northbourne went missing 5 days ago and hasn't been sighted since. Police say they are growing increasingly concerned for Miss Cudworth's safety.
What's transpired, it was, yes, much worse than we thought.
Kent Police, where's your emergency?
It's my wife. She walked out early hours Wednesday morning and she ain't been back since.
In the Kent village of Northbourne, police investigating the disappearance of barmaid Micah Cudworth now suspect she may have been murdered. Believing messages Micah sent her friends after she went missing were actually sent by someone else, police question a man she was suspected of having an affair with.
The police released a statement to say that they'd arrested somebody, a man, in connection with Micah's disappearance.
But the man they arrested is not her suspected lover, but her husband, Jonathan Cudworth.
One of John's sisters said he'd been arrested, and I was like, what?
The news sends shockwaves across the village. How could this loving husband have anything to do with her disappearance?
It's hard to describe, really. It's just a lot of disbelief, I think.
The initial reaction for people in the immediate vicinity would be shock, surprise, nice couple.
When somebody's been arrested in connection with someone's disappearance, the public interest really does step up. That's what people then really start to talk about at the school gates, in the pub.
As rumours circulate around the village, it is revealed that Jonathan has been arrested on suspicion of GBH after police visited his house and noticed drops of blood by the front door, with Jonathan admitting that he had a minor altercation before Micah stormed off. Officers secure the house as a potential crime scene and carry out a search of an outbuilding.
And it was outside by the shed that they found some drops of blood.
Inside the outbuilding, officers discover a blood-stained doormat and cat basket. Both items are immediately seized and taken for forensic testing.
I would think that was the time that this became a homicide murder investigation.
Gradually, the realisation came that she may have actually been killed, and the police presence was becoming, in that sense, rather more sinister.
In custody, police believe the evidence points to Jonathan having more than just hit Micah.
During police interviews, he strenuously denied that he had anything to do with Micah's disappearance.
Jonathan, he was a nice lad. He wasn't mean. I don't remember him being aggressive or angry or volatile.
Jonathan admits he has Micah's Facebook password and posted messages pretending to be from her in Polish. But he says it was to stop her friends from harassing him. He says the blood found was from a minor altercation. Police decide to charge him with murder. But there's one problem. 7 days since she was last seen, there's still no sign of Micah, dead or alive. Officers widen their search both inside Micah's home and the surrounding areas. And suddenly, there's a breakthrough. A large amount of blood is discovered in the sitting room beneath the rug. And more blood is found in the boot of the family car. Police discover Jonathan had bought the rug in nearby Sandwich after Micah had gone missing. Slowly, they start to piece together Jonathan's movements since Micah's disappearance. The search for her is becoming desperate, and the family turn to their friend Ali.
Ali Austin is a psychic. She was contacted by Jonathan's family and asked if she would be able to help in the search for Micah.
So to label myself, I'm a fortune teller. I'm a psychic, I'm a clairvoyant, a clairaudient. I see, hear and sense things. And a message came through, and it was from one of John's sisters. And it said, "Hi Ali, is there any chance you can do a reading for me?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." And they were like, "Would you come out and search with us?" And I was like, "Of course I'm going to come out and search with you." And then we went off and we continued to search for 16, 17 hours a day.
We have known of a psychic being brought in before to help try to locate a body. The body has never been found, but sometimes that can be of help to the family because they feel that they're getting somebody to help them. When somebody has lost a member of their family, they will cling on to any kind of hope that they might still be alive.
I just wanted to help this family. I was just like, these poor people, this is horrific. She needs to be laid to rest. And that was all I focused on.
As Ali joins the search for Micah, along with family and friends, police discover video evidence from the night following Micah's disappearance.
A friend of mine, he had a CCTV, which was pointing out to the road. And I think it was John said he didn't go out of the property on that particular night, but it proved to be just after 2 o'clock, I think, in the morning, there was his car going by.
Detectives believe the 10-minute trip is significant in their hunt for Micah and concentrate their search to a 5-minute drive of the house. Further CCTV from earlier that day also proves key to the case against Jonathan.
There is capture of CCTV images from various areas, which includes him in a shop buying cleaning materials and attending a Deal pier, throwing items which turn out, we think, to be her handbag and her phone off the end of the pier.
I think that that's a vital cog that it enabled this investigation to keep on turning and for them to find out what had actually happened.
With police believing the CCTV proves Jonathan is responsible for Micah's disappearance, it also shows he made a trip to a refuse tip with multiple large bags. The search for Micah shifts to a landfill site. As the police search spreads, Ali Austin is concentrating her search in Eastry, where Jonathan grew up.
Quite a few of us were out, and I was like, why don't I try dowsing? Dowsing is a method that has been used for centuries to find objects. Even when I say it, it sounds ridiculous, but we had nothing to lose. I was exhausted. We were in a field, and there was me and Jonathan's sisters, and I used this ring. So I took this ring, and you hold it. So we had this map, and I just got everyone to close their eyes and concentrate, and I was like, just say Micah, like, where are you? So we were sitting there, and I'll be honest, even I'm like, this is ridiculous, you know, this is ridiculous. And the ring stopped on a point on the map, on a roundabout.
Ali and the family make their way to the roundabout and immediately begin to comb the surrounding fields.
I just remember pulling up, and I ran off away from my car, and it was a rape field, and it was like 5 foot high, and you can't move. I've never been in a rape field. You can't move in that stuff. It's all intertwined. And I remember like literally being like this in the field, running like in a zigzag. And then the next thing I know, I was standing on her. And she was in the field. So when I found her, I just remember screaming to everybody. I found her and told everybody not to move and not to come. But that was the point that her body had been abandoned, yes. And this is where we waited, and obviously it was, from that point, it was a crime scene. I didn't even think about what would happen if I did actually find her. I never gave that thought. But then when I'm standing there, looking at her, 12 days after her life was taken, I can never unsee that.
Kent police have said that the body of a woman found in a field near Eastry in Kent is that of missing 36-year-old Micah Cudworth.
The news that everyone feared has now become a reality.
There was a real sense of grief and loss. For that to happen was, really quite shocking for people and disturbing. It's a sort of incident you would more likely expect to happen in a big city.
It's a sad, sad thing more than anything else. And Mika was suddenly not being here anymore. It was upsetting, and there was a certain disbelief with that. When you lose anybody in a community, it's tragic, very tragic.
Micah's body is taken to the mortuary where a post-mortem is carried out to determine a cause of death.
The post-mortem reveals Mika was stabbed, I think, 4 times. It would appear she lost half the blood in her body. The injuries she sustained as a result of those stab wounds were clearly fatal.
With Jonathan already in custody, detectives turn their attention to the circumstances surrounding the discovery of Micah's body, and specifically Ali Austin's involvement.
This psychic comes into the frame. She used to go to school, I think, with Cudworth. She practices her psychic medium, and apparently, as a result of some readings that she's done, she finds the body before the police. It's bizarre, absolutely bizarre. I would certainly be having the lady in for questioning.
Suddenly, Ali Austin finds herself at the centre of a murder investigation.
I was told to present myself at Folkestone Police Station, and I rode to Folkestone Police Station on my motorbike the next morning. And I was showed to a room, and there was 2 or 3 kind of like detectives there. And the next thing I know, they brought all these maps out, and they're going to me, put a black cross where your mum and dad's house is. So I was like, okay. So I looked at this massive aerial map. I put a black cross where my mum and dad's. They went, put a black cross where Jonathan Cudworth's mum and dad's house is. So I put a black cross where they live. Put a black cross where you found Micah. So I did that. And I remember at that point something in my head going, this isn't right. This is not, why are you asking me this? This is ridiculous. And then I asked for a break, and I went to get my cigarettes from my crash helmet, and they went, leave your helmet here. And I was like, pardon? And they were like, can you leave your helmet, please? And I was like, why, am I under arrest then? And they were like, no, but you're not allowed to leave.
Ali Austin's involvement sparks a lot of interest from the national media.
It had all of the ingredients for a juicy murder story. The first thing you think is, the husband's done it. But then, a psychic sniffs out the body. That is the sort of thing that, whether people believe it or not, they're interested in, and they want to read, they want to find out everything. It refreshed the story.
But Ali's potential involvement is soon eclipsed following a revelation that on the night of the 10th of May, Jonathan had called a family member from prison and made a startling admission.
He admitted to the crime, the killing.
During the call, Jonathan disclosed the area where he dumped Micah's body. Using this vital info, his family had then turned to Ali to help pinpoint the exact spot. Following this revelation, the police are happy she played no other part.
I do believe I was a suspect. I'm like, local psychic. Maybe I put her there and then wanted the glory of I found a body. Morally, that just rips my soul to pieces to think that at some point in a police interview room or a police station somewhere, I genuinely believe that I might have played a part in putting that woman there. But they don't know me. There was a lot of coincidences. I can't deny that.
With Micah's body discovered and Jonathan charged, the question remains, why did this loving husband murder his wife? And how? Jonathan Cudworth has been charged with the murder of his wife, Micah. Despite the evidence against him, Jonathan pleads not guilty to murder. He claims diminished responsibility because of a momentary loss of control, and the case is sent for trial.
Having admitted to the killing and even charged with murder, it's then, of course, up to a judge and a jury, isn't it? That's all the police can do, is put forward the facts, the evidence that they can obtain, and any explanation that the defendant may give.
On the 7th December 2015, the trial begins at Canterbury Crown Court. And the question on everyone's lips is, what could have possibly led to Jonathan losing control and killing his wife, Micah?
John had a trust issues. You know, he didn't trust Micah. He thought Micah was having an affair.
My neighbour, said that there was problems, probably, with their marriage. He'd heard them arguing. She met somebody else, which was one of the reasons for the domestics.
So police found that Jonathan had been tracking Micah's whereabouts through a phone app, which suggests that he had a growing sense of paranoia about where she was, what she was doing, and who she was spending time with.
The court hears what Micah and Jonathan had been arguing about the night she was killed.
Jonathan had been questioning Micah about where she'd been and who she'd been with. And he lashed out in a jealous rage.
The jury hears Jonathan's prepared statement, claiming that Micah had admitted to an affair and was goading him aggressively. The defence being that he momentarily lost control.
Jonathan said that Micah had become aggressive, and he, as a reaction, had felt around for the weapon, and he'd hit her.
This was some tragic crime of passion, that he was actually the victim of this really strong-willed woman that was having an affair. They rowed, he's gone mad, and he's put a knife in her.
The court is stunned to hear Jonathan's version of events. But had he really killed her in a moment of madness?
Crimes of passion, of course they can occur, None of us could say we haven't got it in us. There's people, they might do something in the heat of the moment, regret it, oh, no, and go, oh my God, this has happened. It could happen to a lot of people in all different scenarios.
However, details from the post-mortem are read out in court, which questions Jonathan's defence, that he simply lashed out. Not only had Micah suffered a blunt force hit to the head, but she had bruises to her wrists and neck, along with a knife attack that the prosecution claim intended to end her life.
I realised that a crime of passion, a mistake, is maybe lashing out, pushing, shoving. Maybe he was cutting apples at the time, maybe he did have a knife in his hand. But she was stabbed 4 times. So she's been stabbed through her heart and then continuously stabbed on the upper part of her body, which corresponds with what my eyes saw.
And soon it becomes clear that Jonathan has a checkered history with relationships.
Police subsequently found out that there was a loose history of domestic violence, which included another ex-girlfriend and Micah herself.
The court hears there had been one prior report to the police of a domestic verbal altercation between Jonathan and Micah.
Micah notified the police that she was the victim of domestic abuse. and that she lived in fear of Jonathan. This wasn't a random crime of passion.
It appears Micah and Jonathan's relationship had broken down completely, and she had made plans to leave him.
Since speaking to her family and her friends, she'd visited Poland 2 weeks before her death. She was leaving him. She'd saved £700, hidden in a drawer. She was going to be free of him. It is alleged that she had met somebody else, and whether she was going to have a life with them, I don't know. And she was confident that it was over. She returned to England, ready to prepare to start her new life.
But before Micah could move on without Jonathan in her life, events conspired to stop her in her tracks on the night of the 29th of April.
She'd been working at the local pub, and then she came home sometime around 11:30, 12 o'clock.
Phone analysis from that evening reveals that Jonathan had become more and more irate as the evening wore on, and was continually asking where Micah was in text messages.
It transpired in court that after Jonathan had killed Micah, he dragged her body to a compost heap in the garden and left her there while he worked out how to dispose of her body.
I believe she was behind the shed, and he covered her body in grass cuttings. Everyone was around, and that is where she lay.
On the next day, Cudworth then got rid of her handbag and phone off the end of the pier and bought some cleaning up materials from a local shop.
And then he loaded Micah's body into the back of the car and drove her off to the field where he disposed of her.
The following morning, Jonathan calls the police to report Micah missing.
Kent Police, where's your emergency?
It's my wife. She walked out early hours Wednesday morning and she ain't been back since.
So is she vulnerable in any way?
No, but she has been a bit down lately.
Okay.
The extent that Jonathan had gone to conceal the fact that he had taken Micah's life. He'd tried to cover his tracks by sending messages to her friends. I get the feeling from this behaviour that it's very calculated, it's cold, and it shows no remorse.
During a grueling trial at Canterbury Crown Court, the evidence against Jonathan appears overwhelming. A sustained, brutal attack on Micah, covering his tracks by disposing of Micah's body and her belongings, as well as a checkered history of past relationships. The jury retires to consider its verdict. Jonathan is found not guilty of Micah Cudworth's murder.
We were so surprised. We thought that there'd been such a strong case for murder against Jonathan, and to find out that he'd been found guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter.
As he admitted to stabbing and killing his wife before the trial, the jury accepts his version of events, that of killing her through diminished responsibility.
I think Mr. Cudworth was an extremely lucky person to get off a murder charge. Very lucky, I think, because I've seen cases where, similar sort of things, and jury come back guilty of murder.
With the lesser conviction of manslaughter, Jonathan is sentenced to 15 years in prison.
It's appalling. It is appalling. How can her life be worth 15 years? How do we stop this? How do we deter people from going that far? We need stricter sentences. A life should mean life.
Even with the case behind them, the local community still feel the impact of Micah's death.
The sad thing with an event like this is it just has really horrible consequences for everybody. For the families trying to move forward in this situation, and it leaves a scar on the community.
It's her resting place, isn't it? It's not ideal. I know her resting place, final resting place is now in Poland, as it should be, but it's where her story ended, isn't it? And it should never have been that way. She didn't deserve this. Regardless of whether or not she was leaving him, regardless of whether or not she was dating somebody else, the penalty that she paid was atrocious. And it will stay with us, it will stay with me. It's an absolute tragedy, and it's a tragedy for our community.
Every shift brings more crime shockers than the last. Join the team and keep them in line Saturday at 10 p.m. in the Force Northeast.
He's just a high school graduate and super poor. Michael probably invited me to the singles party as a scapegoat just to make himself look better. Sure. He is usually competent at work and is undoubtedly a promising man who graduated from a prestigious university and works for a major corporation. But his mistake might have been flaunting it too much. After sending the drunken Michael home, I stayed behind with the 3 women. We were just talking, and we were wondering if you'd like to have another drink somewhere quieter. What? In the end, we moved to a quieter place and decided to continue drinking, no longer treating it as a singles party. My name is Jim Johnson. I work at a law firm and am 29 years old. The firm I work for is one of the largest in the city. We have a diverse group of professionals, including lawyers, judicial scriveners, and administrative scriveners. And I'm a practicing lawyer as well as an associate director. Our firm is staffed with young and talented individuals. Let me share a bit about my childhood. Both of my parents were lawyers, and I was raised in London until I started elementary school. My parents were international lawyers. However, London was dangerous at the time, so my parents decided to send me to school in the US. As a child, I lived with my paternal grandparents in the US while my parents traveled between the US and London for their legal work. When I started elementary school in the US, I struggled to adjust since I had been in the UK all my life. Eventually, I made friends, but preferred to be a lone wolf. I didn't seek to join groups, which suited me just fine. I think it was around that time that I met Michael. Michael and I were classmates in elementary and middle school. He was always the leader type, always at the center of the group. We weren't exactly friends, but we weren't enemies either. We just went about our daily lives in our respective roles. In middle school, as the school district expanded, we got more classmates from different elementary schools. But neither Michael nor I changed our stance. I continued at my own pace, while Michael remained a standout. We went to different high schools, and we reconnected about 2 years ago. He suddenly called out to me at a restaurant, and at first, I didn't recognize him. "Hey, is that you, Jim?" It's me, Michael. We went to elementary and middle school together. Oh. Michael, it's been a while. Honestly, I was a bit confused. Michael's charisma was still the same, but his appearance had changed significantly. We weren't particularly close back in school, but he never seemed this flashy. He still had a bright personality, but now he was dressed in obviously expensive branded suits and had an unnaturally perfect hairstyle. "Jim, what are you up to these days?" "I'm usually working at a law firm." "How about you?" "I work for a trading company." "They say I'm a rising star." "Wow, that's impressive." Michael is in the sales department at Young Trading Company, and according to him, he's highly regarded there. I thought it was typical of Michael to brag like that. He sees himself, and others see him, as a successful guy. "Jim, you graduated from high school, right?" "What?" "Well, I heard a rumor." You graduated from high school and then moved away. Well, I did move. His house and my grandparents' house, where I lived until high school, were in the same district, so he must have heard about the move. It's so typical of him to assume I only graduated high school because of that. I decided to just let it slide. After graduating from high school, I moved to the UK to join my parents and enrolled at Oxford University. Given that I had few friends in the US, not many people knew this about me. I juggled both Oxford and law school, and upon graduation, I became a lawyer. With parents who were international lawyers, it was a natural path for me. Like my parents, I also became an international lawyer, worked in London for a few years, and then returned to the US when my current law firm offered me a position. The firm, although large, is relatively new. I joined as part of the founding team and was appointed deputy director, working alongside Mr. Anderson to expand our connections and build the firm to what it is today. As a comprehensive legal office where legal issues can be handled in one place, we have attracted business without much advertising. Although I'm often interviewed, I prefer staying out of the spotlight, so not many people know my face. That's why Michael doesn't know my background. Michael's change wasn't just in appearance. He continued talking to me after our chance encounter. Perfect timing. Jim, are you free this Friday? Friday night? I think I am. What's up? There's a drinking party, or rather a networking event. Want to join? What kind of networking event? Well, to be honest, it's a singles party. We need one more guy. I'm not really interested. Come on, don't say that. It's at that Michelin-starred restaurant in the city that everyone's talking about. It's a rare opportunity. Michael still thought I was just a high school graduate. I had been to that restaurant several times for client meetings, but I pretended not to know. A singles party at such a famous restaurant? That's pretty fancy. Are you worried about the cost? Don't worry, I'll cover your share. So just come. I don't care about the singles party, but if it's just about having dinner, I guess I could join. That's fine. Great, I'll send you the details tomorrow. Here's my contact info. Michael handed me his contact information and left. I've never voluntarily joined a singles party. In a way, it might be a rare experience, just as Michael said. As a lawyer, I'm comfortable talking to people, but this might be a unique chance to enjoy a Michelin-starred dinner for free. So I decided to go with a light-hearted attitude. On Friday, I headed to the restaurant mentioned in Michael's message. After mentioning his name at the entrance, I was led to a private room. There, Michael and 3 women, who appeared to be office workers, were already seated. Oh, you made it. This is my childhood friend, Jim. Nice to meet you. I'm Jim. Thank you for having me tonight. Nice to meet you. We work in reception. We exchanged polite greetings. All 3 women were elegant and beautiful. I was slightly curious about how Michael managed to arrange the singles party with these 3 women. With 3 women present, there were only Michael and I as the men. Just when I thought another man might join, Michael started the proceedings. All right, we're all here, so let's start. Wait, aren't we missing someone? The other guy canceled last minute. Let's just enjoy ourselves with this group. Thus, the singles party began. But it turned out to be a singles party for Michael, by Michael, and all about Michael. For a while, we chatted peacefully about general topics and our backgrounds, with Michael at the center. But as he got more drunk, he started to loosen up more. So, I graduated from the University of California's Department of Economics and I'm a rising star at Young Trading Company. Okay. Compared to me, he's just a high school graduate and super poor. It's amazing how different our lives turned out even though we grew up in similar environments. Hey Michael, you're drinking too much. Oh, I guess that was a sore spot for you. Sorry for bringing it up. It's not that, it's just ruining the mood. Everyone's having fun, aren't they? Don't worry about it. Michael was completely absorbed in his own world. Despite his bragging about his background, the women seemed completely put off. Should I do something about this? But I was just here because Michael invited me for dinner. I didn't feel the need to put in any extra effort. I excused myself and headed to the restroom. As I washed my hands and took a moment, I noticed one of the women standing and looking at me. "Excuse me. Sorry about Michael. I didn't know he had such bad drinking habits. We're fine. More importantly, yes? You're not really a high school graduate, are you?" "What?" I was taken aback. I hadn't shared my background or current job with them, and as far as they knew, I was the high school graduate Michael had described. How did she know? "You don't recognize me, do you? This is our first meeting, right? Actually, I know you. I'm Jessica. I work at the reception desk at your law firm." "No way. I recognized you as soon as you arrived. I thought Michael knew, too. But then he called you a high school graduate and super poor. And I couldn't figure out why. Michael and I aren't close. I just came along for the ride today." "That makes sense. I was surprised to think you were friends with someone like Michael, but now I get it. It's understandable. I hadn't seen Michael in nearly 15 years, and I didn't graduate from a university in the US. I was raised by my grandparents in the US from elementary school through high school. So Michael probably assumed I was poor without my parents around. We went to different high schools and didn't keep in touch, so he had no way of knowing my career path. Michael likely invited me to the singles party thinking I would make him look better. Did he really want to be admired that much? Was he dressing in expensive brands to impress others? I started to feel a bit sorry for him for his character. Not wanting to leave the group hanging, Jessica and I returned